How are you feeling? How long have you been here?
3 months, May 17th.
And what brought you?
That's difficult to answer.
Eventually resulted in your being here in the hospital.
That's difficult to answer.
the end? There's a noise inside my head of crying people facing death. Is this the end? Is this the end? I'm burning in the dystopia. There's no place to hide. I'm burning in the dystopia. This is the final time. What have we done to the world? What have we done to the world? I'm burning in the dystopia. There's no place to hide. I'm burning in the dystopia. This is the final
What up, everyone? Happy Friday. We did it. We made it through another week. And on Fridays, we usually take it a little bit easier on the channel, or at least we do something that I think is going to be more fun. And sometimes I think that the things that I think are going to be more fun are not actually going to be more fun. They're going to be more painful because I'm a little bit of a is it a sadist or a masochist? I forget. What is the one that likes inflicting pain on themselves? I think that's a masochist, right? I'm a little bit of a masochist in my own life, and sometimes I feel like I need to inflict more pain on myself, and thus all you get to suffer with me. I know this sounds so enticing. Don't you? Are you guys happy you showed up today? I'm not saying today is going to be a painful day. I actually think today is going to be a pretty chill day. You know what? Listen, it's Good Friday. Happy Good Friday to everyone who celebrates such things. Easter is on Sunday. Happy Easter to everyone who celebrates such things. And I actually do mean that. Listen, I'm not a Christian, but I do respect other people's, holidays and stuff like that. I'm not going to be like James Lindsay and go off on like how you shouldn't say Christ is King on your high holy holiday. That would be like a little bit disrespectful. And I hope you guys all do have a wonderful weekend. And I hope those of you who are seeing your family and going to church and having Easter dinner and all that stuff, that's, I think that's awesome. And I hope you all have a really, really good time. Hey, thank you. I'm Jack for becoming a member of the channel. I really do appreciate it. Yo, Easter is on 420. Well, you know what? There are no coincidences. There are no coincidences. Who wrote it's not AI. Burning into neither of the songs in the intro are AI. The first song is by Siggy, who's a friend of mine, who's a groiper, and he goes by Holy Vacant on Spotify. So he actually wrote that song, the first one. And then the second one, Burning in Dystopia, I forget the name. It's a song that so basically I have a subscription to a website where I can license music. Like I basically paid like a one-time lifetime fee, and it gave me a whole massive archive of music that I could use on my YouTube channel without like getting copyright restrictions or things like that. So Burning in Dystopia is actually from that collection. I don't remember the name of the artist. I've been meaning to go back and find it because people do ask me about this all the time. There's also an instrumental version of that song that I've used sometimes. But isn't it funny? It's like the perfect song. I feel like both Siggy's song and Burning in Dystopia combined are just perfect for I feel like they wrap everything I do into a nice little bow. But I will find that information for you. It's not AI. It was actually just I know, Liquid Marble. I know. I have last week's episode ready to go. I just need to upload it. And I promise you, I will upload it. I will do it later today. I promise you. Please forgive me. It's been one heck of a week, my friend. Please forgive me. Please forgive me. Let's see. Let's look in the chat. Let's see who's here. You know, we should start doing roll call in the chat. That, like, other channels do that, right? I don't know. Maybe I should actually pay attention to what other live streamers do and actually learn from them. Because, you know, one of the things I do want to do on this channel, and, you know, I'm thinking a lot about this because, you know, this is going to be the year I'm really looking to scale what I'm doing to a very significant degree. And I'm going to need everyone's help in scaling this, okay? Because this is the year, guys. This is the year where we've been in our own little private world for the last several years, just watching the left, documenting the left. You want me to set up a soundboard? I do need to set up. Okay, fine. Okay, I will try to set up a soundboard. I do actually have it. I just don't know how to use it. Anyway, so this is going to be the year that we're going to take everything that we've been doing as a community and that I've been kind of spearheading as the face of it and the person on the video and the person doing the Substack and all that. I want to push this out to the world. And one of the things that I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need your guys' help with that. Because this is what I've always said. This is not just about me being like the person on the video. This is just the position that I happen to find myself in, rather accidentally. This is not about me. This is about us. This is about we. This is about what can we accomplish together as a community. Because the thing of it is I have a very kind of eclectic, weird mix of people who watch this channel. And I don't say that with any disrespect, but you guys got to admit, you're weird. I'm weird too. I'm very weird. Have you seen my website? I have a plague doctor as a logo. I'm into horror movies. I'm into like gothic like things. I have a very specific aesthetic that I like. I don't know if you guys have noticed this about me. I'm a weird person, okay? But most of you are weird as well. And we can all be weird together. Nothing wrong with being weird. I would much rather be weird than normal if I'm honest about it. Like, I've always been an artistic person. I've always been a creative person. And I finally feel as though to a certain extent I'm figuring out how to bring my weirdness into the world in a way that I haven't been able to do it before. Anyway, what's my favorite horror movie, Bobby? Nightmare on Elm Street. Nightmare on Elm Street Part 1. There is no movie that will ever usurp Nightmare on Elm Street. Nightmare on Elm Street is the ultimate. Freddy Krueger is the ultimate villain. And I will never, ever, ever betray my great first love of horror movies that was Freddy Krueger. Because Nightmare on Elm Street is the best. It's the best. And so what I want to do this year is I want to take what we're doing and scale it up, not only in terms of taking all the information that we have and getting it out there more, but in terms of actually scaling this community and bringing more people into it. Now, you guys know I've been very hesitant the past couple years to bring more people into our weird, wacky world because I've had a lot of challenges on the internet. I've had a lot of psychos that have attached themselves to me that have made it their business to make my life difficult. But the thing of it is, you know, one of the things I realized is that literally everyone who does this sort of thing has those types of psychos in their lives. And we cannot allow the psychos making things difficult to prevent us from doing what we want to do. We saw a good example of that this week where Josh Slocum, this person who is obsessed with personality disorders, has literally been diagnosing my mental health on the internet for years, has had meltdown after meltdown after meltdown about me. And it's like, are we going to allow people like that to control what we give to the world? I would argue no. I would argue no. And so in order to overcome that sort of thing, I need your guys' help in terms of helping me to bring new people in, access communities that I haven't thought about accessing before. And in return, I'm going to be pushing my stuff out in a big way that you guys don't know about yet because I'm not giving away all my plans on the internet just yet. But essentially, the whole goal of this is to step up our game. It's to take what we're doing and make it available and accessible to far more people. And it's to really hinge back, make sure there is a resource in the world where we are hinging back into reality. Because I really think the world has gone mad. I feel like there is a whole contingent of people, and I think that the fact that Twitter has monetized around this is actually driving this sort of like obsessive, ridiculous behavior. I think that a good portion of people who are doing commentary on politics have lost their minds. Now, I never envisioned myself as someone that would just sit here and pontificate and tell you what I think about politics or anything else. That's not what I ever had in mind. I'm a psychologist. I'm an organizational psychologist. I like analyzing social systems. What I've been doing for the past several years on this channel is analyzing social systems, trying to do it from a detached perspective as much as possible. Of course, I do have my own personal opinions about things, but ultimately at the end of the day, what I think I've shown above all else is that I'm willing to take in new information and change my mind and evolve my perspective in a way that I don't think a lot of people are. I think a lot of people are really dug into their tribalist narrative, and they take in information and then they twist that information to make it conform to whatever tribalist narrative they're trying to sell at any given time. Has anyone else had this experience on Twitter recently where you can literally tell what the conservative Inc. talking point of the day is just based on the things that the parrots on Twitter are parroting? And it's not like, and when I say the parrots on Twitter, I'm talking about mostly these NPC type people where they don't have original thoughts of their own. They're not thinking critically. All they're doing is they're listening to their favorite talk show, they're listening to their favorite influencer, and then they go out and they parrot exactly the same talking point. And if that talking point is different or fundamentally contradicts the talking point from 3 days ago, it doesn't even dawn on them. They don't understand that you just said something else 3 days ago that's completely contradictory to the thing you're saying now, because your favorite influencer changed their talking points from the things they were using 3 days ago to the thing they're saying now, and it doesn't make sense, but they are not capable of seeing it. We are very literally living in idiocracy. I am convinced of this. We are living in early stages idiocracy. And that is my very definition of a nightmare. I don't know about anyone else, but like, I didn't realize how smart I was until I became known on the internet. I'll tell you that right now. I always thought that, like, listen, I always knew that I had some abilities. I always knew that I processed information quicker than most people. I always knew that, like, when I was in school, I was the person that didn't study for the test and still came in and just finished the test before anyone else and handed it in and just sat there and read my book for the rest of the time, because that was what I did in school. While other people were actually doing work in school, I was sitting there reading like R.L. Stine horror books when I was in middle school because I finished all the work. So I always knew to a certain extent that like I had some intelligence that was not normal. School was always pretty easy for me. I didn't necessarily always get the best grades because it was so easy for me that sometimes I was like, this is just stupid and I don't even want to do it, which I actually think is pretty common. I think sometimes, you know, I'm not talking about Asian kids because Asian kids will get beat by their parents if they do this. I'm being like, I'm not actually 100% serious saying that, but I just like, there was so many things in school. I was like, this is dumb. I just don't feel like doing it because like why would I need to do this? And I think a lot of other people have that kind of experience, right? Anyway, but even with that reality, even with the reality that I did a lot of college, man, I did years and years and years of college. I know how to write. I know how to read papers. I know how to talk like a smart person if I really, really need to. I know how to speak academic. This is part of the reason why I'm so good at interpreting the far left is I actually do know how to speak academic. I can write academic. I wrote a dissertation, man. I wrote a comprehensive exam. That stuff isn't easy. Like I've done all this stuff before on numerous occasions, right? But I really didn't know how much smarter I was than normal people until I got known on the internet. And then I all of a sudden had this exposure to a massive, 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 massive amount of people. Trust me, when you are exposed to as many people as I've been exposed to, you understand that most people are pretty dumb. And that's not their fault. I'm not saying they're bad people. I'm not saying that I think anything bad should happen to them. I'm just saying that the world is a crazy place and we cannot allow the people who have not been blessed with the highest IQs in the world to dictate what we say and do. We can't do that. So, and I think to a certain extent, I have been holding myself back, and I've been holding back the content of this channel over the past couple of years because I did not want to interact with those people. And people, you guys have given me this feedback, and I kept pushing back against it. And you know what? Listen, I'm not suggesting that I'm going to go out there and pitch myself to the quartering or anything. We're not lowering our standards quite that much, but there is important and valuable information on this channel, and there's important and valuable information that we can get out there that literally no one else is talking about that I found. And listen, man, maybe there are other people in the world talking about what I'm talking about. Maybe there are other people in the world studying what I'm studying and watching the materials that we're showing on this channel. And if we push it out there more, maybe we'll find them. And honestly, I think it would be awesome to find other people doing what I'm doing and as into this stuff as I am and as into this stuff as we are. It is a huge fucking world out there. I mean, who knows what, like, there's so many different groups of people, right? Sometimes, and I'm just talking right now, I've got some things to say, and then we'll do our happy hour thing. I'm about to make a really weird analogy, but some days, has anyone watched the show Battlestar Galactica? I'm talking about the kind of like reboot of it with what was his name? Edward James Olmos. Like, I love the show Battlestar Galactica. I've watched it so many times, just start to finish. I will sit there. Actually, I don't even watch TV anymore, but like if I still watch TV, God, there used to be weekends when I would just sit on my ass and watch TV and knit, just like all weekend. I don't know what that's like anymore. I haven't done that in years. But anyway, I love the show Battlestar Galactica. For people who've never seen it, it's basically they're on these giant spaceships in space looking for Earth. And it's a lot more complicated than that. I'm not going to go into the whole plot of the Battlestar Galactica about how the Cylons, who are the AI robots that are pretty much exemplary of the AI we've got on Earth right now. The AI we've got on Earth are eventually going to turn into Cylons, and they're going to blow us all up because we treated the robots really badly, and then they went off to the other side of the universe, and then they came back to try to blow us up. And there's like spiritual components of it as well, and all this stuff. But the point I want to make is on Battlestar Galactica, they were all on giant ass ships in the middle of space. And yet, there would always be new people showing up on Battlestar Galactica. It's like, how does this even happen? Like, the ships in Battlestar Galactica, they may be giant ass ships flying through space, but like, there is a finite amount of people on those ships. There is a finite amount of room on those ships. You can't just keep finding new people in the middle of space. Where did those people come from? The world has been blown up. All the planets have been blown up by the Cylons. Where did all the new people come from? Like, there'd be new people coming in all the time. Like, in the second, third, and fourth season of Battlestar Galactica, you're like, you're a new person. Where the hell have you been? Like, where have you been on the ship? And so I bring this up to say, it's like, this is how I feel on the internet, is sometimes we feel like the internet is such a small place because we see the same people showing up over and over and over and over and over again. And we get used to those people. And then all of a sudden new people show up and they've got all this audience with them. And you're like, who even are you? Where did you come from? Like, how the fuck do you have this many followers? Like, what are you even doing? And that's how I feel about the internet, is we're on the giant Battlestar Galactica ship in the middle of space, but still new people just keep showing up. And that's because the world is a really big place and there are a lot of effing people in the world. And we cannot assume that just because we might have access to like a lot of those people, that we know everyone. We don't know everyone. We haven't talked to everyone. We haven't gotten our stuff out there to everyone. And there's a lot of people then, and I know this sounds bizarre for people like us who are on the internet all the time. There are a lot of people who are not on the internet like we are. In fact, the majority of people are not on the internet like we are. And we can still talk to those people and we can still reach those people. And maybe we can even get those people to come on the internet and join us. And then their minds are really going to explode. They're not going to know what fucking hit them. We need to go out and find those people. We need to scale this type of content out to those people. And, one of the things I've been thinking about a lot this year, and you guys will see that reflected in my books. You guys will see this reflected in the things that I've been writing on the Substack. I used to be very, very militant in my writing and very, very, very militant in the way that I was teaching about the far left. And listen, I want to be very clear about this. I absolutely think that my information and my perspective is the correct perspective on the far left. I have not deviated at all in terms of the militancy in which I believe my ideas are correct. Now, if you have evidence, I will look at your evidence and I will always take in new information. But I'm not upset with myself for becoming militant in what I believe the truth is, because I think I've done the work and backed it up with enough evidence that I feel very confident in my position. What I have not done a good job of is making this content palatable for new people. I don't think I've done a bad job. I think that my content is more palatable for new people who are just starting to learn this stuff than anyone else's content. Like, I would put anything I've written up against anything James Lindsay's written, like literally anything, and people will understand my content more than they understand James Lindsay's. So I'm not saying that what I've done is necessarily bad. However, one of the things that I've really been working with AI with, and it's been so helpful in this regard, is learning how to teach this content to normal people, learning how to temper my language to normal people. Because one of the things that has been a struggle is people do not understand what studying the far left has done to me. And I didn't anticipate this either, to be quite frank. This is not something I ever thought I would be doing. But you have to understand that I have been immersing myself in far left subcultures for 4 effing years. Almost every day. And I've been sitting in those subcultures, and it's like I've been sitting in a back corner of the room, watching what's going on in the room, trying to interpret everything that's going on in the room, trying to understand the far left as I understand myself, trying to put myself in their shoes to be able to understand how they see the world without saying they're crazy or mentally ill or all those things, because I don't actually believe they are. But I've been trying to put myself in the mental headspace of the left for so long, so consistently, that it has fundamentally changed who I am. And it has fundamentally changed how I see the world and how I communicate with the world. If you guys saw me, if you guys saw me 5 years ago doing corporate training, don't get me wrong, there would still be some similarities. I've always been kind of like a fiery bitch, for lack of a better term, but you would not recognize me from 5 years ago based on the person that I become today as a result of doing this sort of thing. Okay. And so the struggle for me in terms of making this content accessible to normal people who have not existed in the world is very, very real. And AI is a godsend to help with that. Because AI, I can put my transcripts into the AI. I can put my videos into AI. I can write all my thoughts and all my talking points into AI. I can even dictate. One of the things I love doing right now is just dictating into ChatGPT, just talking into the microphone, and ChatGPT just dictates all of it and transcribes all of it and loads it in. And it's like I get to feed my ideas into the AI, and then I get to say, AI, help me tell this to the world in a way that they're going to be more receptive to it and they're going to understand it. So we can create more content that is capable of going out and reaching more people. And again, I think I've done a fairly good job of this. I think I've done a much better job than most people. But the difference between what I've been producing in the last couple months and what I produced before that is light years. And I've gotten positive feedback on it. Yeah, Reagan says, I've seen the positive difference with you creating the content with AI to help. It is amazing. It is amazing. And I've heard this from people who are reading the content on the Substack. I've heard this repeatedly. Karlyn, I love the direction you're taking this in. I love what you're doing. I love this direction. I can understand this. I can share this. That is the goal. That's the goal. The goal is to get this content out to as many people as possible, to get this content in front of as many people as possible, to bring as many people into our weird, wacky community, and to, dare I say, even make it fun to study the far left and to learn about the far left and to be creative with how we teach this material to others. I mean, I think we have such an opportunity to satirize the far left. That's what I've been doing with a lot of my branding, and what you're going to see continue to happen. I'm satirizing the far left. I'm satirizing it to teach people about it, to make it interesting and fun to learn about this stuff. Because again, there is no one in the world who understands how soul-sucking this stuff can be than me. And so if we're going to engage with this, we have to make it fun. We have to make it interesting. We have to make it creative. Creativity is going to be a very big part of this community. I have so many creative people in my community who are writers and artists and make cool stuff. And even if you're just doing AI art and you're just dicking around with that, who cares? You're still creating something. You're still creating something cool that could inspire someone else or even just inspire you to do something else, you know? Creativity is going to be a key part of what we're doing. And I want to create a place where everyone, and I mean regardless of political perspective, because I'm really kind of in my I don't care what you believe or the things we disagree on arc. I just don't care. I don't feel the need to argue with everyone on the internet over every single thing that we might disagree on. If you want to support Israel, support Israel. I do not support what Israel is doing in the Middle East. But like, if you want to support Israel, I don't care. I don't think any less of you. If you are Jewish, guess what? As long as you're treating me with respect and courtesy, I will treat you with respect and courtesy, because I don't care if you're Jewish. I care how you show up as a human being. If you are a man, woman, gay, straight, trans, cis, even non-binary people. I've had non-binary people in my community before, and I kind of go to them. I'm like, I don't actually believe in what you're doing, but you know what? You are an adult. You're allowed to do whatever you want. I don't care. As long as you're showing up. If you are non-binary and you want to learn where the idea of non-binary came from so you can understand what you're buying into, then I will show you. And if you listen and you see that I don't hate you as a person, it doesn't matter to me how you live your life. But if you see these ideas and you're like, oh, I had no idea the idea of non-binary came from this weird subculture philosophy that's all about destroying gender and the nuclear family and uprooting our entire way of life. Most people who identify as non-binary have no idea where this stuff came from. They are victims of an ideology that has a cult-like indoctrination system within our public schools. They don't know where the ideas came from. We can reach them, we can tell them, and then we can say, listen, man, if you feel like you're weird and you feel like you don't fit the specific definition of a woman, you know what? Join the club. I've been a tomboy my entire life. I know that's shocking information to people. I've been a tomboy my entire life. I've never fit in with the idea of what it's like to be a woman either. And yet I still exist in the world. I mean, it's like we don't always have to fit in, but like the greater point is that this content should be accessible to anyone. And I'm not interested in fighting with people about all the ways in which we might disagree. If you want to learn about this stuff and you're interested in it and you think it's weird and crazy and you kind of like hanging around a community of weird, crazy people, welcome. And you don't want to cause problems and you don't want to be disruptive, because that's really the key. I don't care about any part of your identity. I care about you being a disruptive dick in my chat. That is far more distressing to me than how you show up. So you don't believe in identity politics? Well, no, I don't really. And the ironic thing is the far left doesn't believe in identity politics either, which we actually just discussed yesterday for Counter-Revolutionary Book Club, where we were reading a leftist document called Queering Anarchism that explicitly denounced identity politics over and over and over and over and over again. It made fun of identity politics because the far left doesn't actually engage in identity politics, believe it or not. And if you don't know that, go watch Counter-Revolutionary Book Club from yesterday and you'll see it illustrated in their own documents, and it wasn't even confusing. So no, I don't think that anything is about identity politics. I think we are the people we show up as in the world, right? I don't even know where I was going with any of that rant. I don't even know. But it is Friday, and so guys, welcome to Happy Hour. We are going to be getting into some fun content today. Now, I'm not going to be drinking today. I know normally I drink beer on Fridays. I'm not drinking today, and the reason I'm not drinking is I really haven't eaten that much this week because my dog died and I've been depressed. And don't worry, I have eaten food. I'm not starving myself or anything. This is the moment my internet haters have been waiting for. Karlyn is finally starving herself on the internet. But no, I'm not starving myself. I'm just not going to drink because I haven't been eating all that much, and I just don't feel like it. I don't feel like it. I don't feel like it. Don't tell me what to do, but don't tell me what to do. I will eat when I feel like eating, okay? And I'll drink beer if I feel like drinking beer. I just don't right now. I just don't. So we are going to be doing a little bit of a fun stream today. We are going to be watching this new show that these two have decided to launch because listen, I don't have an issue with Brad Polumbo. I don't think I have an issue with him. I don't know. I guess I'm not sure. I don't feel like I have an issue with him. I feel like I've seen him do some things in the past where I was like, okay, he really made some smart points just then, and I have nothing bad to say about him. I don't care about him either way. Colin Wright is a jackass. Colin Wright is an overly intellectual jackass that is marrying a hardcore porn star, and we never quite did figure out if Colin knew that Christina Buttons was a hardcore porn star for years and years and years and years and years and years and years. Maybe Colin Wright knew she was a hardcore porn star. Maybe he didn't. I don't know which is better or worse, but apparently he is marrying Christina Buttons, who is a hardcore porn star, and she pretends to be a journalist even though she doesn't actually produce any journalism. And Colin Wright, without ever looking at the work that I've done, without ever looking at the content that I've created, has proceeded to diagnose my mental health on the internet many, 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 many times. Because all Colin Wright looks at is clips out of context on the internet or listens to his friends that spread smear campaigns and act like general crazy people. Yup. I mean, I think this sentiment is pretty common in my audience that Colin Wright is a jackass who insists on being ignorant about the real far left. Yup. I'm not going to say Colin Wright's dumb. I don't think Colin Wright is dumb. I just think that Colin Wright is hinged into a world where he has to shill a very specific narrative. And I do think that Colin Wright has convinced himself that his narrative is the truth because intellectually he has to look himself in the mirror. It's like we can always convince ourselves of lies if it benefits us to be convinced of those lies. Like if you would feel guilty about being intellectually dishonest, just convince yourself you're not being intellectually dishonest. Like you really can do these things. The human brain knows how to do that. We lie to ourselves all the time. People convince themselves of lies all the time. I could go on and on and on about that for days. Anyway, Colin Wright, who is a jackass that's marrying a hardcore porn star, has started a show with Brad Polumbo, who I have no inherent issue with yet. And apparently they're talking about queer research or something. And people told me I had to watch this because it was funny and they didn't know what they were talking about. So this was a recommendation from someone in my community. They were like, oh, they have no effing clue, Karlyn. And I was like, oh yeah, that'll be a fun thing to watch for happy hour. So we're going to do that. Well, we can find what's right by talking through it and being respectful. Yeah, that's the idea. That's the whole idea. And guess what? Even if we end up disagreeing, we should still just be able to talk like rational adults without wanting to kill each other. That's actually the idea. The ideal is not that we all agree at the end of the day, because that's not realistic. It's never realistic to say that everyone in the world is going to agree on every topic. But what we can do is come to a place where we're like, okay, you're not being evil or hateful for disagreeing with me. And, maybe I'm not going to smear and defame you on the internet just because we don't have the same opinion. And you know what? Maybe we don't actually need to hate each other. Maybe it doesn't fucking matter if we don't agree. What a concept. Maybe it doesn't matter if we don't agree. Maybe there are bigger problems in the world that we can focus on that have nothing to do with petty disagreements that don't effing matter. So we're going to watch this. But before we do that, we have to watch this clip. We have to watch this clip. You guys are going to be floored. I only saw like half of this clip, and I was so floored. I was like, I'm saving the rest of it for the show. I feel so incredibly ashamed that I was ever associated with Dave Rubin. I feel so incredibly ashamed that I ever associated with that ecosystem, that Dave Rubin, PragerU ecosystem. Yo, if you guys want to know why I'm so forgiving when people don't know things that I know, it's because in 2020, there were a lot of things I didn't know when I got sucked into this whole world. And I know that people found me from Dave's show, and I know that people found me from PragerU, and I guess I'll be thankful for the people that found me as a result of interacting in this world. But it's like there's so much that I didn't know. And the shift that I see from the Dave Rubin that I met in 2020 to today, who the fuck has he even become? Was he always like this? I mean, I know he had that thing with Joe Rogan where Joe Rogan always thought he was a fraud. And that's why he doesn't go on that show. But I'm like, I look back and I'm like, I had honest conversations with Dave in person. Like not for show, not online. Just like an honest conversations about leaving the left and how crazy the left was. And he wrote a whole book about arguing that we shouldn't be censoring people. It's literally called Don't Burn This Book. He was always lovely to me. I cannot fathom the person that he has become. I cannot fathom what I saw in this clip today. And listen, I've watched his descent into Zionist insanity since October 7th. And even after October 7th, when he was calling for protesters to be censored because he didn't like their ideas, I thought that was bad enough. Now he's literally arguing that the people who were gatekeeping the ideas in the past just didn't do a good enough job. It wasn't the gatekeeping of ideas that was the problem. It was how they were implementing the gatekeeping of ideas. And it's like, bro. Once you see how this entire system works, you can't unsee it. Once you see how fake and gay these people are, you can't unsee it. And then I'll tell you what, it gets so easy to identify who's fake, who's real, who's fake, who's real. It gets so easy to identify. People are confused about why I'm friendly with Nick Fuentes, even if I'm fighting with the Groypers or not fighting with the Groypers, depending on whatever given day. The reason that I don't mind being friendly with Nick Fuentes is not that I agree with him on every topic in the universe. The reason I don't mind being friendly with Nick Fuentes is that Nick Fuentes is real. He is a real person. These are really his beliefs. He is incredibly consistent in his beliefs. He might sometimes think things through and change his mind. Does he love Trump? Does he not like Trump? All this stuff. Like kind of the same kind of like normal human thought process that happens when you're constantly thinking about issues and maybe you're growing and evolving and stuff like that. So I'm not saying that Nick never changes his mind on anything, but by and large, he is completely consistent and always has been. So even if you disagree with him, he said the same thing 3 years ago that he's saying today. Dave Rubin was not saying the same thing 3 to 4 years ago that he's saying today. It is completely different. And one of the other things that I've learned too is that it's so interesting, this cycle on the internet. This is like I've been on the internet for 5 effing years now. I cannot believe it's been that long. One of the things that I've learned is that most people who kind of like show up on the internet, they don't last that long. There are not that many people who last a long time doing this because it is hard to do this, man. You have to show up consistently. It's not always the most fun thing to do in the world. It is a lot. And so most people kind of come in and drop out, which means that many people don't even remember who Dave Rubin was 5 years ago. Really think about this. The reason that Dave Rubin can actually, with a straight goddamn face, put out a video saying, oh, you know, those gatekeepers just didn't do a good enough job gatekeeping, is because most people do not remember who Dave Rubin was 5 years ago. I remember who Dave Rubin was 5 years ago, or at least I remember the image that he showed to me, which bears no resemblance to the person sitting in front of me today. And when you see it, you cannot unsee it. And I think it's probably worse for people like me who knew these people up close, who like I interacted with these people when there were not cameras on. And to see the difference between that and this, so I want to watch this clip with everyone, and I want you guys to see it, and I want to talk about it, and that is what we're going to do. Before we get into the clips, guys, just a quick reminder, we have a couple big things that have come out this week. Now, if you have been to my relatively new website, this is decodetheleft.com. This is one of the ways that I'm going to scale my content to get it out to as many people as possible. We're going to be doing a lot of outreach to a lot of different places. And one of the things I'm doing on Decode the Left is I'm providing reports and frameworks and resources to help people understand what the far left is doing, all grounded into reality of things that have been collected from primary source evidence in the real world. For instance, you can find this guide. I'm always trying to teach people that there are different types of leftists and that Democrats are not the same as communists. Liberals are not the same as socialists. These are not the same. They are not the same groups. They don't believe the same things. They don't have the same actions in the world. Over on Decode the Left, you can find a guide to mapping the modern left so that you can understand, here's how Democrats show up in the world. Here's how liberals show up. Here's how progressives show up. Here's how democratic socialists show up. Here's how socialists show up. These differences matter. If you do not understand your enemy, you will never be able to defeat them. If you think you're fighting Democrats, but you're actually fighting socialists, these groups have two fundamentally different beliefs. They have fundamentally different tactics. They show up differently in the world. You have to understand this stuff if you're taking this seriously. So I provided that resource to help people take that seriously and to learn more about it. This week, however, I have launched what I think is a pretty groundbreaking report, and I have not seen any report on the campus protesters that is as comprehensive and as actionable as the report that I launched on Decode the Left this week. It's called The Campus Insurrection: Who's Organizing It, Funding It, and Fueling It. You can find it at decodetheleft.com/campus, and it is a free download. And basically, I went through and I analyzed 30 different groups that were involved in the organizing of the campus protests. Not all these groups were student groups. There were some student groups. There were many non-student groups. And I went through and I told you who the groups were, what their strategy was, how they're showing up in the protests, how they're showing up on college campuses, how they're showing up in the streets, how they're impacting our world. I showed you their funding sources, how they're actually funding this. Some are funding it with NGO money, some are self-funding it. It really just depends. And I showed you how tactically you can negotiate with them in order to contain them. This is the most thorough analysis that I've seen on real life far left activists that are behind the protests that you see showing up in the streets all the time. It is important who these groups are. You need to understand who these groups are. Is Open Societies Foundation involved? Hey, guess what you can do? You can head over to decodetheleft.com/campus and you can download the report and you can find that information out. Now, what I will tell you is not really. This is mostly not George Soros funded. That is the favorite talking point of conservatives. They say everything is George Soros funded. There are NGOs involved. Tide Foundation actually funded a lot of this stuff. But you're going to find that most of this stuff has nothing to do with the Open Societies Foundation. And that is a lie that the right's been telling themselves for a really effing long time. We need to start hinging into reality. So you can go download the report. It is about 70 pages long, 70, and you can read all the information for yourself. And so that is available on decodetheleft.com/campus. And I'm going to be doing a free webinar on April 30th. You can also sign up for that on the website, where I'm going to walk people through the report and I'm going to answer questions. So if you know people who work at colleges and universities, send them this report. If you have, I'm serious, guys. I worked in higher education a long time. I know many of you know people who work at colleges. Many of you work at colleges yourself. You have contacts that work at colleges. You can send this to people like at your alma mater, whatever it is. Get this report to people in higher education. They need this report. This will break down what groups are going to cause problems on college campuses and how do you negotiate with them? How do you deal with them? How do you contain this situation so that it doesn't blow up like it did at Columbia? Columbia made a very easy unforced error. Columbia never had to invite the NYPD onto campus. That was a huge error. I'm talking about at the very beginning of the protest, because prior to Columbia breaking a decades-long tradition of banning the NYPD from campus, the NYPD hadn't been allowed on their campus since 1968. And then the protesters started sitting around on the lawn, and this was annoying the Columbia administration. And then when the protesters weren't even doing anything other than sitting on the lawn and setting up a tent here and there, Columbia invited the NYPD onto campus to take care of the problem. But it didn't take care of the problem. It made the problem 1,000 times worse. Because in the days after Columbia did that, the protest quadrupled in size because it pissed off the students. It pissed off the faculty. It was a completely unforced error. And had Columbia actually known what groups they were dealing with, I could have told them not to do that. I could have told them, here is the worst possible decision you can make for reason X, Y, B, and Z. And here's what's going to happen if you make that decision. And the worst decision they could have made is what they did make, which was breaking a decades-long tradition of inviting the NYPD onto campus. There were other ways to handle that protest at that time that would have kept it more contained and would have maybe not prevented the media spectacle that ensued after that, but certainly slowed a lot of it down. There's a reason for all of this stuff. These groups behave the way they do for a reason. And I want to share that reason with people, and they can find out by downloading the Campus Insurrection Report at decodetheleft.com/campus. And if they have questions, they can get in touch with me. They can come to that webinar, and I will help people understand this. So if you have contacts at colleges and universities, get this information to them. It's relevant other places too, but that's the most important place that it's most relevant right now. Another thing that I want people to know about is that we do have a monster spy stream coming up next week. Now, if you've never been to a spy stream before, spy stream is where we go inside a live leftist training and we watch it live and we record the whole thing. And occasionally, when spicy things happen, we release clips on the internet that go viral and make the news. So there is a very real chance when you come to spy stream that you can see the news happens before it gets on the news, which is actually kind of cool. Okay. Next week, I am trying to execute my biggest spy stream of the year. So far, anyway. It is a multi-day spy stream covering one of the most far left, most crazy, most woke, most insane social justice events that you will see happen this year. There are very few crazier groups that I know of. And I know of a lot of crazy groups on the left, but there are very, very few that reach the level of the group that we are going to be infiltrating next week. And this is going to be going on for hours a day, okay? So I want people to know these are going to be long-ass spy streams because there are going to be a lot of presentations to watch. And some people have seen the lineup, some of my most trusted people who I know would never leak this information. Some people in the chat have seen the lineup and they can attest to how insane this lineup is. We are going to see insanity next week. I promise you. This is like when we infiltrated that teacher activist training a couple weeks ago. And I told you guys, I was like, I know the group that's putting on this training. We're going to see insanity tonight. And then what happened? That insanity went viral on the internet. So you got to see the insanity before it went viral. And I promise you, this spy stream next week, and there will be more information coming out about it next week. I have to keep it very close to the chest so people don't find out what we're doing. This will make your entire membership in my Substack worthwhile if you enjoy this type of thing. I promise you. Okay? So if you want to join us, head over to my Substack. That is Karlyn, KARLYN.substack.com. Sign up as a member for $8 a month, $80 a year. This is how you can join us. You can also become a member on my locals, a YouTube channel member, or a Twitter subscriber. But for my money, I would like everyone on the Substack as much as possible. We are going to be doing a membership drive for the Substack starting next week. Everyone who signs up between now and then is still going to count because I'm looking for an overall membership goal. So if you want to help get me started on my overall membership goal, then sign up now because there are certain numbers that we need to hit for me to be able to do the things that I want to do and what I want to give to the world. And so I need your guys' help to do that. In return, I will do supporter exclusive events for you like Spy Stream. You'll get access to my supporter Discord. You'll get access to private calls with me and private access to me. And you'll be able to do a lot more of this stuff with us, which is really, really, really fun. And I greatly appreciate it. All right. Let's start. Hopefully everyone has mounted the like button for me. Hopefully everyone has subscribed to the channel if they have not already. Let me just get myself set up here. All right, I want to watch what Dave Rubin said. Yeah, can everyone pray a rosary for me right now? Say a prayer. I'm not Christian, but you guys can all pray for me. I don't mind. All right, let's see what Dave had to say.
Our friend Konstantin Kisin from the Trigonometry podcast, he put up on Substack an article about something that's been kind of brewing online. And I'm just going to read you one line of it, and I want your take. Podcastistan is a place where people scold the mainstream media for failing to live up to their standards while having none of their own. And this was to the backdrop of a Douglas Murray, Dave Smith debate, largely about Israel on Rogan's podcast. And I've been thinking a lot about this because people are putting aside even the specifics of the debate, and you guys are welcome to talk about whatever you want, obviously. As we watch mainstream collapse and the gatekeeping that you were talking about earlier, James, and most people watching this, I think, agree that gatekeeping has been terrible, especially COVID, I think, blew apart so many doors for people that now they're questioning everything. And you've got people thinking that Winston Churchill was the bad guy in World War II and somehow Hitler was good. And just like the litany of things that we've upended. we are finding ourselves in a weird place where everyone's just going off to their corner to find truth. I do the best I can on this show to tell people what I think. I'm going to have some blind spots and make mistakes every now and again. But as we whirl further into podcastistan, as Constantine is talking about, is this like, in some sense, the most dangerous thing that a modern society can be in, where we're just going to all define truth for ourselves? And in some ways, we have to blame the previous gatekeepers because they did not do a good enough job gatekeeping correctly.
The previous gatekeepers did not do a good enough job of gatekeeping correctly. And that's why it's dangerous for people to listen to podcasts. Let's just hear that again. Again, Dave. Oh, perfect. Perfect. Again, say that again, Dave.
Is this like, in some sense, the most dangerous thing that a modern society can be in, where we're just going to all define truth for ourselves? And in some ways, we have to blame the previous gatekeepers because they did not do a good enough job gatekeeping correctly.
This man made millions of dollars writing a book titled "Don't Burn This Book," which pretended to be against censorship. That was 5 years ago. Today, this man, and perhaps I should use that term rather loosely, this person, this they, them, is with a straight face and no sense of irony at all, saying things like, the previous gatekeepers did not gatekeep correctly. Now, do you guys think that anyone talking to him on this show, to be, of course, James Lindsay, who has lost his fucking mind by any objective standard, and Wynton Marshall, who I guess is the musician who married Melissa Chen. I have nothing against Wynton, but I think that he has been sucked into a world that he does not fully understand what he's in, much like I was in 2020 before I woke up and I realized how fraudulent all of these people are. And by the way, I actually do like Melissa Chen, and it makes me really sad that this is the team that she's picked. I don't have anything bad personally to say about Melissa Chen. Melissa Chen was always nice to me. I think that she is a good person. I think that she tries harder than most people. I really am very disappointed that she's all caught up in this because it's unnecessary and it's unbecoming, honestly. Let's hear that one more time and then we're going to let this play.
Podcastistan, as Constantine is talking about, is this like, in some sense, the most dangerous thing that a modern society can be in, where we're just going to all define truth for ourselves? And in some ways, we have to blame the previous gatekeepers because they did not do a good enough job gatekeeping correctly. If I'm framing this correctly, James, feel free to clean that up if you don't agree with the premise.
No, you're not wrong.
So James Lindsay, unsurprising to anyone that has watched my channel and my coverage of James Lindsay's insanity over the past year and a half, James Lindsay, of course, agrees that, you know what, the biggest problem is the previous gatekeepers didn't gatekeep correctly.
Social constructivism I talked about earlier is relevant, but also what you're witnessing is postmodernism. What he's actually putting his finger on is called the postmodern condition. So now we have, I guess, the alt media, which largely codes right. Podcastistan is a great name for it, because if you don't pay your right dues to it, then they'll kick you out. That it has gone postmodern. This is the postmodern condition, and everything that went along with postmodernism on the left that sucked is going to come here. That also.
So if you are not a classical liberal, according to James Lindsay, and you are not a Zionist, that means you are a postmodernist. Yes, this is what we call critical Gnostic theory. It's something that James completely made up that is not grounded into reality at all.
sucks. But the social constructivist viewpoint, which, by the way, critical constructivism is the formal academic name for what we call woke. The social constructivist viewpoint is that there's a they out there, the critical constructivist, because you got to be critical theory of it. There's a they out there who have gatekept the institutions so that their knowledges are considered valid and nobody else's outside knowledges are considered valid. Therefore, outsider knowledge that challenges the existing establishment is considered more valid. And so that's actually also what he's touching on. So this is why these people qualify under a brand name like woke right, because most
You are woke if you consider ideas outside of traditional knowledge and traditional systems. Okay, James.
of them identify on the right. They push so-called right-wing values, and they've adopted a left-wing epistemology. I said that in long form with Winston on his podcast when we were at ARC together and talked about this same issue. So they value outsider knowledge that supports a prevailing anti-establishment narrative, aka a critical theory. And so this is what we're actually seeing in, and of course, Constantine has, I envious here, a way with words that is sometimes just positively magical, and he's done it extremely well there. I'm a little frustrated with my friend Douglas from that debate because the word that didn't come up from the journalist that should have come up.
Hang on. I started watching this section of the clip, and you guys are about to understand. I got so pissed off watching this section of the clip. And anyone who watches my content on a regular basis, I know that you're about to be pissed off on my behalf, okay? And I want everyone to feel free to express your feelings over what is about to come out of James's mouth. Is everyone ready to hear the completely unironic argument that James Lindsay made in this clip that is going to piss you off for probably several days after hearing it? Everyone ready? All right, let's do it.
Magical, and he's done it extremely well there. I'm a little frustrated with my friend Douglas from that debate because the word that didn't come up from the journalist that should have come up, that needed to come up, that I'm dying for it to have come up, is due diligence. It's not about expertise in that particular discussion they had. It is about whether or not due diligence has been done before reporting is being brought to the surface.
James is upset that he believes that other people have not done their due diligence to really make sure to fact check and double check everything they do before reporting it out to millions of people. James Lindsay is making the argument that he is the arbiter of due diligence when most of my community was blocked by James for showing him video clips of the far left that didn't fit his narrative. If you give me literally any one of James Lindsay's talking points right now, I can, within a couple of minutes, go and find a clip from a far left training that directly debunks the lies that he has been telling people about what the far left believes. And you don't have to take my word for it. It is on video by them. You can just listen to them, and they will tell you everything you need to know to believe that everything James has been shilling for years to millions of people, he is so full of shit. And for him to, with a straight face, say, this is just about doing due diligence and making sure people tell the truth. Anyone who has ever actually looked at primary sources knows that he is the one that has not done any due diligence at all, has behaved grossly irresponsibly for years and years and years, and is such a goddamn narcissist that he is not capable of looking himself in the mirror and understanding what he's done and the amount of damage that he's caused, because he literally sees himself as God. Because he has a traumatic head injury and it's acting up. And everyone thinks this is normal as long as they agree with his talking points on Israel. This is not about truth. This is about promoting a narrative that a lot of people believe it's beneficial to them to promote. And that is all that it is. It is fundamentally unhinged from actual reality that we have documented on video for days and days and days and days and days. Do you know why none of these people have ever been able to have an intellectual discussion about my work? They only lie about me. They only call me crazy. They only make character attacks. They say, oh, look, she's fat. Do you know why they always make character attacks and they are never able to argue me intellectually? Because I would kick their ass up and down the fucking sidewalk with clips and primary sources they don't even know about, and they fucking know it. There is not one intellectual argument you can make against my work because I have every single thing I say backed up with primary source video or documents or anything else that comes directly from the far left. And I have it all indexed so I can pull it out at any moment to contradict any unhinged reality assholes like this want to sell. And that is why they make character attack after character attack after character attack. And then they have the fucking gall to go on a show and say everyone else is responsible for doing due diligence. Un-goddamn believable. Unbelievable.
Come up from the journalists that should have come up, that needed to come up, that I'm dying for it to have come up, is due diligence. It's not about expertise in that particular discussion they had. It is about whether or not due diligence has been done before reporting is being brought to the surface. And Douglas's point was, I've done due diligence before I wrote my book, and you haven't done due diligence for the amount you talk about this. And due diligence.
James, I've been doing due diligence for 4 fucking years. Going inside leftist trainings almost every single day for 4 years. I have a massive archive of clips of leftist training. You have never even looked at it. You refuse to acknowledge that it exists. You ignore evidence that contradicts the narrative that you are trying to sell to conservatives to make money. And then you have the gall to judge what other people consider as evidence? Unbelievable.
Due diligence. It's not about expertise in that particular discussion they had. It is about whether or not due diligence has been done before reporting is being brought to the surface. And Douglas's point was, I've done due diligence before I wrote my book, and you haven't done due diligence for the amount you talk about this. And due diligence is a concept that hasn't fallen out of view. Like, you looked up the Alan Shepard stuff. That was doing some due diligence on this. You vet all of the clips that you show. That's doing due diligence before you put together your show. That's actually a high standard of journalistic integrity. It's not present in Podcastistan. And as
it's excuse me. It's not present in Podcastistan. James, we have you on video stealing my work multiple times, almost word for word, from the things that I have said from Podcastistan. Although they probably think I'm not relevant enough for that, even though they still come here and steal my work anyway. Huh. All we do on my show is watch primary source evidence. And James wants to pretend that watching primary source evidence directly from start to finish is not doing due diligence. That just doesn't exist. No one on the internet that has a podcast is doing due diligence.
That hasn't fallen out of view. Like, you looked up the Alan Shepard stuff. That was doing some due diligence on this. You vet all of the clips that you show. That's doing due diligence before you put together your show. That's actually a high standard of journalistic integrity. It's not present in Podcastistan.
It's not present in Podcastistan. I'm old enough to remember a time when James Lindsay demanded that Not the Bee from the Babylon Bee remove a link to one of my primary source evidence videos where we spent 4 hours watching an Abolish the Family presentation on a Saturday, and I put that video on the internet, and it was a beautiful video. It broke down so much about Abolish the Family. I was able to teach people about what the left was doing, what they were saying. We were using the primary source evidence, of course, because we watched the whole presentation. And Not the Bee put that in an article that they wrote where they used one of my clips, and James demanded that video be removed because I was not owed a finder's fee on the internet, and I have all of this documented. So he will demand that primary sources be removed and then still have the fucking gall to say that he's the one doing due diligence. Okay. And just so you guys know, that was about where I turned the clip off because I was like, I don't need to see anything else. So we're going to watch the rest of this clip and I'm going to see what they have to say. But that's as far as I watched when I watched it on my own earlier.
And as Constantine kind of has poked that bear and revealed, they don't like having that mirror held up to their face, but that's because they're postmodern and don't have anything else.
Yeah.
So,
exactly.
Winston,
Okay,
I know that
yeah.
this issue is near and dear to you, and we talked about it on your podcast a couple of weeks ago as well. Do you think part of the problem here is that it's something that I reference all the time that Jordan Peterson brought up years ago, that the left never knows when to gatekeep the left, right? They never know when they've gone too far. And now we're seeing a version of that on the right for the reasons that James just put out there. The gatekeepers were so bad, again, I think particularly during COVID. I think had COVID not gone so crazy.
So Dave Rubin's argument is the left doesn't gatekeep the left. And you know what? The right doesn't gatekeep the right either. And I think that's bad because if the right isn't gatekeeping the right, then people might have ideas that I disagree with, and I might not be able to get those ideas banned off the internet.
Crazy. A lot of this doesn't happen, but now everyone's willing to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Well, I would say I'm so happy that the likes of both of you gentlemen, as well as Constantine, as well as Douglas Murray, are being very quick to call out when the right are going too far. They're making no hesitation, which is not something that we can say about the left and how the woke cult took over the Democrat Party and much else. So I don't think that the behavior on this side of the fence is quite comparable. But I'm not sure that this is saying anything new, but perhaps rephrasing what Constantine is observing, which is that I think why I started watching shows like yours, Dave, and others is because I lost faith in the mainstream media because I knew for a fact that they were at best only showing half of the story and at worst intentionally manipulating what was really going on. Who could forget the famous Chiron mainly peaceful protests? And what it seems to have happened is a sort of what is happening is the sort of an equally bad opposite, which is that the podcaster Stan, as Constantine calls it, is now only showing half the story. And a good example of this, and I would say on a personal level, Joe Rogan is a very lovely.
No one is obligated to cover the content that you want them to cover. No one is obligated to tell their story in the way that you want them to tell it. We are not obligated to have both fucking sides. If I had the socialist left on my channel every single week to balance out my perspective about socialism, first off, it would never happen because they would never talk to me anyway. But secondly, we would literally never make any progress. We would never be able to do anything because it would be constant bickering and arguing and deflecting and all this bullshit. We are not obligated to tell both sides of the story. If we can go on Twitter and see kids in Palestine and Gaza getting their fucking limbs blown off, guess what? We're not allowed to say, oh, but look, the people dropping the bombs, they're really good people too. And even though they were advocating for their ability to rape prisoners on video. You know, I'm sure there's still very fine people there. You know what? There are very fine people on both sides of the Israeli-Gaza conflict, okay? The fucking gall of these people to think that we have any obligation to them at all.
Man, it's certainly in my interactions with him, but it is the case that he's had on his show a lot of pro or rather anti-Israel voices, a lot of anti-Ukraine voices, which is not itself a problem. But the problem is they're not commensurate with the opposite side being heard at all.
What?
So you're getting one side, and I would even say, you know, Douglas Murray goes onto the show. Dave Smith was on the week.
Wait. If it's so important to show two sides of the story, I will look for Dave Rubin's invitation to come on his show and talk to James Lindsay. If that's so important to everyone, if it's so important to everyone to show two sides of the story, Dave, I have a massive archive of clips of the left that contradict every single thing that James says, especially about what queer theory is and what grooming is and all of that. I have a massive catalog that shows just how much he has lied to people. If you think that the only possible course of action that is fair and justified is having both sides of the story, I'll look for my invitation on your show, bro. You have my number. Of course, that's never going to happen. But don't tell me we just want everything to be fair and balanced. No, they don't. They want to silence people they disagree with.
Before, when Douglas goes on, we need to invite Dave Smith on to just make sure everything you say is, you know, checked. And so there's his due diligence there. But so the due diligence maybe is only being applied to one side of things. Now, he might come back and say, well, it's not his responsibility to show all sides. It's his show. He can do whatever he wants.
Yeah, exactly.
And he's actually right. He can do whatever he wants. But it is the case that his show is, I think, the biggest in the world still. It has been at points. And if it's not, it's up in the top 5. He's got an enormous influence. And so if he's not going to bring on voices to challenge people like Daryl Cooper, who are saying, you know, Churchill was the chief villain in World War II. Or, in fact, when Daryl Cooper went on Joe's show, he said, you got to take Mein Kampf with a pinch of salt, for which he got no pushback. And I'm sorry, that for me was the moment where I was like, actually, this has gone too far. So, yeah, I think that the duty is on us.
So, okay, I'm sorry for all the nice things I said about Winston Marshall before, because I now think this guy's an idiot. I'm sorry, I was wrong. I do have an opinion on him now, and he is a moron. Are you serious? Dave, it was just a step too far when someone expressed an opinion I disagreed with, and there wasn't pushback on that opinion from a famous podcast host. Can you imagine, Dave? Can you imagine? Oy vey. Someone expressed an opinion I disagreed with on a podcast, and that was when I knew that things had gone too far, and we need to start gatekeeping ideas. My accent just went horribly wrong. That was a horrible accent. Don't pay attention to the accent, okay? But the point is, how did this happen? How did people go from understanding that like free speech was actually, you know, a good thing and that censorship was bad to someone expressed an idea on a podcast I didn't like, and because the famous podcast host didn't push back on him, I just think we need to start doing more censorship and gatekeeping. How about don't listen to the podcast? How about just don't listen to it? If you don't like what it has to say, go listen to something else.
Us now to speak up about it.
I would
Dave.
just add if that, or go ahead, James, and then I'll.
Yeah, can I do the boil down trick you did? So I'll take all this wonderful brilliance of Winston that he just gave us, but it's my dog crap analogy with the gatekeeping, right? So we know not to eat dog crap, but we also know that ask Maha, it's pretty wild over there. Maha understands Make America Healthy Again, if you don't know what I'm referring to, understands that, you know, the gatekeepers at the FDA have not been doing their job right. They're letting all kinds of like fun chemicals. I think Chick-fil-A has like aluminum and sugar or something in the breading. I don't know, something crazy. All these different things have been allowed, food additives and so on. So the question is, what do you do with this, right? Is it, hey, they've been lying to us about what's in our food, so let's eat dog crap because anything goes? Or is it, maybe we need a more responsible regulatory agency that's making sure that all this crap isn't coming through? And so it's very much reminiscent of that. And
we need a very responsive regulatory agency for what people are allowed to say on a podcast. I'm sorry, what? James Lindsay wants a regulatory agency for what people are allowed to say on podcasts? Again, please.
But the gatekeepers at the FDA have not been doing their job right. They're letting all kinds of like fun chemicals. I think Chick-fil-A has like aluminum and sugar or something in the breading. I don't know, something crazy. All these different things have been allowed, food additives and so on. So the question is, what do you do with this, right? Is it, hey, they've been lying to us about what's in our food, so let's eat dog crap because anything goes? Or is it, maybe we need a more responsible regulatory agency that's making sure that all this crap isn't coming through? And so it's very much reminiscent of that. And what Podcastistan represents is, we've been betrayed by our institutions for not doing their proper role, and therefore let's just throw caution to the wind, is kind of what Konstantin's saying, when it should be, in fact, what we need is to reassert journalistic integrity and rigor to the greatest degree possible.
As a reminder, I have a massive amount of video clips that contradict almost everything James Lindsay teaches about the left, using primary sources from the left itself, where you can hear the left say it, and you don't even have to trust me, and you don't have to like me, and you don't have to like my tone, and you don't have to like my hair, and you don't have to like my weight, and you don't have to like any of those things. But you can listen to the left say that James and all of his work is full of shit. And so I will absolutely not be lectured to by someone like him, someone as intellectually dishonest as him, someone who spread a smear campaign about me for years, went around telling everyone I tried to sleep with him. And then when I found out about it, I said, James, can you give a date or an event or a direct message or any sort of evidence at all that said I tried to sleep with you? And James's answer was, oh, I'm not saying that she did anything. She didn't do anything. I'm just saying she wanted to. And that was why he smeared me for years, to try to discredit my work, because he was stealing it almost word for word in his speeches that he was doing all over the country anyway. Do not think for 1 second that I am ever going to take advice on journalistic integrity from someone like him, who exhibits absolutely no intellectual integrity in any of his work, will not debate his work, will not look at any evidence that contradicts his work, blocks people who come into his feed to try to show him, because he's lying to millions of people about what's going on. I am never going to take advice from someone like him about what I am and am not allowed to say on the internet. And anyone who proposes that we should just be keeping a really shorter leash on people, that's the person who's trying to control you. That is the authoritarian. That is the censor. That's the fucking fascist. He wants to pretend he's liberal. If he was liberal, he could actually debate ideas instead of just hurling personal insults and attacks and defamatory lies. He is completely incapable of engaging in any liberal discourse at all. All he knows how to do is silence people who disagree with him. That is it. And that is why he is on this show explicitly arguing there should just be more regulatory pressure on podcasters to make sure they don't say anything that we don't like.
Gentlemen, I guess our work is cut out for us.
I'll make one other observation, if I may.
Mm-hmm.
For years, we've been told that the right wing is
Hang
Nazi.
on. Can anyone confirm he actually talks about Karlyn that much? You can go to my YouTube channel where I have documented all of this. We look at screenshots of his tweets. We look at his direct Twitter timeline. He has said all of these things about me and more. I also have a whole article over on my Substack where I challenged him to an intellectual debate and laid out a very specific set of intellectual grievances. In that article, I documented all sorts of other crazy shit that asshole has said about me. I also have recorded conversations on this channel of someone who was sleeping with James who told me exactly what he said to her. So yeah, it's all documented directly. And you are welcome to refer to my YouTube channel, my tweets about it, my Substacks about it, any other source of information. And if you were over here on YouTube, my chat on YouTube would tell you that everything I'm saying is accurate because they've seen all of it themselves.
And Trump's a neo-Nazi and all of this and fascist this and fascist that. But now that there's actual Nazi apologia coming out of certain parts of the right wing, I don't hear anything about it from the left. It's weird, isn't it?
Right.
It's
We
the
were
right
all
wing.
Nazis when we weren't Nazis. Now there's a couple kind of Nazis and nobody's a Nazi. Or the lefties are the ones etching the swastikas on the Teslas.
I don't always wear tinfoil, but if I was, I would say they're giving us enough rope to hang ourselves.
Wow. Wow. Let's just move on, shall we? Shall we just move on to the main show? I have nothing else to say. I have nothing else to say. Except that, I guess, if you can't see through the three people that we just saw in that video and know that they are all selling a narrative that they're paid to sell, then you probably haven't been on the internet long enough. And I'm not trying to judge you if you can't see through that, because there was a time when I couldn't see through it too. I get it. I really do. There are people that are new at everything. The internet takes some acclimation to get used to it and to understand it. And so if you can't see that that was inauthentic shillery, just stick around for a little while. Maybe stick around. But all three of them, it's like, I was about to make a horrible analogy that actually sounded like something cool. They're basically like robots. They're robots that are trained to say what they're saying. They are paid money to say what they're saying. And anyone who's been around long enough can see right through it. And it's only going to get worse. It's only going to get worse. I promise you. It is only going to get worse. All right. Well, speaking of worse, the main thing I wanted to watch today is this new show between Colin Wright, who I think is a jackass, and Brad Polumbo, who I really have no issue with and don't have any beef with at all. And because someone told me I should watch this show because Colin Wright doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about and we could laugh at it. And so we should always, listen, I'm not going to be accused of not doing my due diligence on the internet. We are going to watch the whole show from start to finish. We don't take clips out of context. We look at the full breadth of what everyone says, and then we talk about it. And so, I'm not going to take the word of my community member as the word of God and say that Colin Wright has no fucking idea what he's talking about. We can watch and see and judge for ourselves, and maybe they're right and maybe they're wrong, but, we always want to keep an open mind. All right, let's see what happened.
We are gathered here today to celebrate the wedding of the brine shrimp, Artemia franciscana, to the ecosexuals.
Hey guys, I'm Brad Polumbo.
And I'm Colin Wright.
And welcome to the pilot episode of
I
the
hate
Citation
him.
Needed
God.
podcast
Oh God.
from Hydro.
Oh God. I already hate him. Brad Polumbo, I have no problem with. It's just like, I had a visceral negative reaction to Colin Wright's voice. I'm not even joking. There was like a reaction in my body, not a good reaction of like, oh shit. I was like, I'm gonna have to listen to this guy talk for an hour. Okay.
Sexual researchers who married shrimp and passed it off as research to bizarre meditations about queer babies that somehow got published we're going to take you along for a wild journey into the broken world of academia. Part of it's just going to be for entertainment value, honestly, because this stuff is pretty crazy, but hopefully we'll also shed some light on some of the disturbing trends that are breaking American higher education. Up first, Colin, you're going to tell us about some feminist researchers who married shrimp? That can't be right, can it?
You heard that correctly, unfortunately.
So the first paper we're going to go through today is called Loving the Brine Shrimp, Exploring Queer Feminist Blue Post-Humanities to Reimagine the America's Dead Sea. Yeah, I have no idea what that means, so maybe you can help us break it down or something.
As a reminder, queer Marxists don't believe in the property relationship of marriage. So I'm already a little confused about why an obvious queer paper is being presented as though it was like a serious marriage. Because it's okay, I could be wrong. We're gonna hear them out. It's my suspicion that they were making a political point in the titling of their paper. So they're doing it in order to take a jab at something. I don't know exactly what point they're making, but I'm going to bet as they talk about this, we're going to find out that this was not actually like a marriage, like they're presenting it as. It was more like a political point.
Summarize it for us.
That is definitely a mouthful. So given the heavy jargon that's typical in this type of woke research, really like simple summaries are often hard to articulate. So, but in my article that I wrote on this paper,
Colin Wright thinks it's hard to talk about what queer means. Oh, Colin. Oh, I knew you didn't know what the fuck you were talking about.
I called it a surrealist love letter to brine shrimp, and I think that really broadly sort of captures it in a somewhat humorous way. Maybe if I add a little more detail, I think it could be described as sort of this mash of critical theory, environmental activism, and even performance art that sort of asks the reader to reconsider their relationship. Now, I wasn't aware that I had one before, but we'll go with that. Your relationship with brine shrimp, and to view them as symbols of queer resilience, ecological ethics, and even what they call hydrosexual love.
No. Hydrosexual, we are on behalf of all the gays, we're not adding that to the alphabet community. We've added enough fake things to the acronym. No more. Is this
Colin Wright accidentally got something right about this that he doesn't understand that he got right. Now, if you listen Counter-Revolutionary Book Club with me, you know that queer activists have a very specific way of writing that is dramatic, that is like art house. It's kind of like, open mic night at like a coffee shop. That's like that style of writing. And so when Colin Wright says they're doing performance art, he's actually right. But he thinks he's making a joke, but that's actually not what's happening. They are actually doing performance art.
paper like some kind of new low, or is this par for the course in academia these days? How bad are we talking about here?
It's part of this growing tradition of postmodern scholarship that really prioritizes a form of ideological signaling over any semblance of intellectual rigor. Though I do have to admit that this paper kind of sets a new standard for academic ridiculousness. And I want to apologize, Brad, but the plus in LGBTQIA plus, that is now the hydrosexual. So you just have to accept it.
Tell us about the author. I imagine an individual, I won't even hazard a guess at the pronouns, who would come up with something like this has to be an interesting person.
Are you going to talk about the paper?
Interesting is putting it mildly, yes. So the author's name is Evelina Jaros. She's an assistant professor in the Department of Media and Cultural Research at UCAN, which is apparently a teaching university.
The Department of Media and Cultural Research. This paper is making a political point that is going to fly completely over their heads, I promise you.
University in Poland that I hadn't heard of before. She, of course, is prominently displaying those she, they pronouns on her faculty page. So you called it there.
Oh, they pronouns is an instant red flag that whatever follows is probably going to be incoherent.
Yeah, I mean, it can be kind of a useful warning, though. So, for instance, the warning is applied here. Her research, quote, explores the intersections of environmental art, queer feminist blue post-humanities, queer ecologies, and activism of pleasure.
Activism of pleasure.
Yeah.
Is that what the kids are calling it these days?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess. So she also identifies as, and this is on her social media, a hydrosexual cyber nymph. And we're definitely going to get into these terms a little bit later.
Wait, so you're telling me a place published a paper by the hydrosexual cyber nymph?
I don't know if I can watch it. I don't know if I can watch this whole thing. I don't know if I can watch this whole thing, guys. This is so cringe. This is so try hard. It's like they don't even like each other. I don't know why they're doing this. They don't even like each other. There's no energy between them. It's all fake. Brad is coming off incredibly fake, and I've seen Brad in a debate before, and he was fine. But like, this is not his strong suit, like at all. And I did not expect Colin Wright to be this weak, if I'm being honest about it. I don't know that I've ever actually seen Colin Wright on video before, but now I completely understand why Colin Wright is intimidated by me, because he is a weak man. Like I just like. I guess keep going, but like I don't know if I can make it through this whole thing.
About the queer wedding to shrimp. Where was this published exactly?
Yeah, I mean, you would think it would be published on like a Tumblr blog or something, but unfortunately, it was published in the Journal of Agriculture and Environmental Ethics. This isn't some obscure journal. It's a real journal owned by journal publication giant Springer Nature. It's this company. It's the largest academic book publisher, and it publishes the journal Nature. So this is the biggest. I mean, Nature is the biggest journal in the world, the most prestigious one, and far away the most influential science journal in the world. So it's not some obscure thing. It's massive.
Wow. So it's not even a fringe thing. It's a real place. What's the point of this journal exactly?
Yeah, it's real. Looking at the journal's website, they claim to seek to publish, quote, research about the relationship of humans to animals, the environment, and food, end quote. So as an ecologist, when I read something like the relationship of humans to animals, I'm usually assuming this to mean it in the way I've traditionally understood when I was being educated on this in an ecological sense. You know, this is how human activity impacts various natural environments and habitats, not like literally marrying brine shrimp and making love to Utah's Great Salt Lake.
Yeah.
Well, that would be a pretty hydrosexual phobic assumption to make there, Colin, now wouldn't it?
Guilty as charged.
So I imagine there's going to be a lot of like buzzwords or woke speak or things normal people who aren't crazy won't understand that you might need to walk us through before we go into this paper in any depth. What is some of the vocab, so we can level set here, that we need to be?
Is Colin Wright about to teach us leftist vocabulary? Okay, Colin, let's see how this goes.
Prepared to understand, to try to decipher this paper.
Yeah, I think just getting through the title was difficult for most people. It certainly was for me. I think the best place to start is the woke buzzwords that are in the title and the abstract, because these kind of frame the entire paper. And I'll try to keep things simple. So the title, again, to remind readers, is Loving the Brine Shrimp, Exploring Queer Feminist Blue Post-Humanities to Reimagine the America's Dead Sea. So one of the first terms that's going to jump out at you there is queer. And so in academia, queer, when it's used to describe people, it's become this kind of a catch-all term to describe really a range of sexual orientations, gender identities, and forms of expression that kind of fall outside of what we consider the societal norm. So
no, confirm. Colin Wright has no fucking idea what he's talking about. Colin Wright has no fucking idea what he's talking about. Completely wrong, Colin. Completely and totally wrong. And listen, man, I'm not going to go through all the archives right this. I guess if someone wants me to go through the archives, I will. But like, you can find all this information on my Substack. You can find this information in the Counter-Revolutionary Book Club. You can find this information in the dozens, hundreds. I don't even know how many videos we've done about queer Marxism at this point. You can, I have so many sources on this. It's not even funny. Colin Wright doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. Queer means anti-capitalist. Queer is about the annihilation of capitalism. Queer liberation means the annihilation of capitalism. Queer goes against anything that's the normal, the legitimate, the dominant. When they say normal, legitimate, dominant, they mean the norms that uphold capitalism. That is what queer is. It is non-normative. It is counter to anything that upholds the societal norms of cultural capitalism. Because capitalism is not just an economic system to them. Capitalism is a cultural system. Queer Marxism is about overthrowing capitalism as a cultural system by abolishing gender, making a world of non-binary, which will inherently abolish the nuclear family because it will disrupt social reproduction theory. And I can break it down way simpler than that off the top of my head. But Colin Wright has no fucking idea what he's talking about. Queer has nothing to do with who you sleep with. It has nothing to do with being trans. It has nothing to do with any of that. It is a rejection of the gender binary. If someone is trans, but they do not reject the gender binary, that means they still think that men and women are a thing. They are not queer. When queer Marxists say straight, they mean normative. They mean normal. They don't mean heterosexual. They mean normative. I know. Let's listen to Colin's definition of queer again, just so we can hear him again say things that are completely fucking wrong.
And so in academia, queer, when it's used to describe people, it's become this kind of a catch-all term to describe really a range of sexual orientations, gender identities, and forms of expression that kind of fall outside of what we consider the societal norm. So anyone who's like a straight person who isn't comfortable with their bodies or their sex, or anyone who really kind of dresses or behaves somewhat sex non-conforming is queer.
Yeah, to me.
No, Colin, no. That's not true at all. They do not consider gay people who just want to be normal gay people and be Colin. If you are in a monogamous relationship as a gay person, they consider that to be homonormative, which is not queer. It is the opposite of queer. If you are gay, married in a monogamous relationship, you are not queer. Monogamy is not queer. They rail against monogamy all the time. We just read about it in the Counter-Revolutionary Book Club yesterday, and that is not even the only time we read about that. So no, it's not about being gay. It's not about being trans. It is about a rejection of the gender binary and the nuclear family, because queer is a far left political ideology that is seeking to annihilate capitalism by attacking the cultural apparatuses that uphold it. That is the definition. These people are termites to the West, and we won't know we had them until it's too late. You're doing the hard work, Karlyn. Would you say the source of these termites is bred in academia? No. It's not bred in academia. It is bred in a subculture that is outside of academia, but has a lot of people in academia. It is mostly made up of academics, but you cannot think of queer as being bred in the colleges and universities. It is bred in more specific subcultures than that. And this is something I cover extensively on my channel. I cover it on my Substack. I'm working on a book about it right now called Queer Marxism. I'm working on 2 different books about queer Marxism right now. So I will be laying all this out, but it is not exclusively academia. It's in subcultures, and it's been around for decades. If anyone else wants to send in super chats to make this less painful, I would really appreciate it. Or you can support my work on Substack right here. We're doing a big spy stream next week. Help fund my stuff. Please help fund my stuff. We're going to be doing a membership drive because we've got to get those numbers up to scale some things. So now's the time. Sign up for the Substack. Make it less painful for me. I would really appreciate it. It'll be less painful for you too. You'll be more bought into it. We're all on the same team. And that team is Colin Wright doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about.
It's sometimes just like straight, but I want attention, or other times if it's just a gay person, but they call themselves queer, they're often signaling some kind of militant ideology associated with their identity rather than just their sexual orientation.
Yeah, that tends to be the case. It's one of those identities that you can just adopt and no one can question. It's not conspicuous. You can immediately join this certain type of community. So one of the next terms in here is one we're probably all familiarized with, is feminist. I think we all know what this means. It has something to do with advocating women's rights, but now we're going to get to a really, really strange one here. Blue post-humanities.
Colin Wright has no idea that trans feminism exists. We learned all about trans feminism last week in the Counter-Revolutionary Book Club. So he didn't actually really give a definition of feminist either. I mean, listen, so the far left doesn't actually like most feminists. So what Colin Wright is referring to most likely is more of a second wave feminist or more like a TERF. But like what he's actually probably talking about is more third wave, which is more like trans feminism. We are so going to regret watching this. Yeah, it's true.
I hadn't heard of this. But from what I can tell and looking at the author's website, this term was made up by the author herself. So it supposedly explores, according to her website, the relationship between humans and water that emphasizes the cultural, historical, literary, and even the theoretical aspects of all these types of interactions with water. It also includes a heavy amount of environmental activism, in addition to what she calls these post-human themes and theories. And this post-human aspect really becomes evident when you're perusing the author and the author's wife's Instagram, where she claims to have mothered a human brine shrimp hybrid baby with her partner. I'm not joking when I say this.
Is this person on drugs? Like, is she trolling? Is this some sort of cosplay thing, or does this woman literally believe she birthed a shrimp hybrid baby?
Oh my God.
I wish I had a really clear answer for you, but it is not entirely clear. I think we'll have to let the viewers and listeners decide for themselves. And I think I know how they're probably going to decide at the end of this. So I mean, we'll keep
Thanks,
going.
Brandon.
And yeah, the readers can decide for themselves if drugs are involved. Another odd term I think that I know I saw for the first time in this paper is the term hydrosexual. So
Trendlin, abandon all hope, ye who enter here.
this is apparently it's a sexual orientation, again, invented by the author. This is what they tend to do, and her partner. So it involves romance with water. So the author's personal website contains something called a hydrosexual manifesto, describes them as aquaphiliacs, describes them as being, quote, babies in love with a non-binary transitional life-giving.
Wait, Bot has a definition. Hydrosexuality is a cultural concept that connects people to water and considers water to be a non-binary substance. So essentially, this paper is exactly what I said it was at the beginning of this video, and Colin Wright doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about, and he doesn't even know what he's looking at right now. It's almost like Colin Wright himself did not do the due diligence that James Lindsay is commanding everyone in Podcapistan do.
Living substance connecting every sparkle of existence on the blue planet. I mean, they're literally just talking about water.
Love is love, Colin. Love is love. I mean, is this just...
Wow. Do queers and feminists fight for the same space? Well, that depends on who you ask, I guess. I mean, Sophie Lewis, who is our favorite abolish the family queer Marxist, would also consider herself to be a feminist, but Sophie also just wrote a book called Enemy Feminisms, which is about all the feminist groups that she doesn't like. So queer Marxists, so essentially what Sophie's book says, from what I've gathered, I haven't read it, but I've seen her talk about it. Essentially what Sophie's book says is that if you are not anti-capitalist, you are not a real feminist. And so Sophie talks about there's all these chapters on all these different types of feminist groups that queer Marxists don't consider to be feminists because they're not anti-capitalist enough for reason X, Y, B, and Z. So, and also like you take like second wave feminists like the TERFs, the people who don't think that trans women are women, they hate the queer Marxists. They're not going to go anywhere near them because the queer Marxists think that gender doesn't exist and that there are fundamental disagreements. The queer Marxists are the ones who push this idea that trans women are women. We read this last week. It was called the Trans Feminist Manifesto. It came out in 2001. It's going to be on last week's episode of the Counter Revolutionary Book Club podcast, which I still need to get uploaded into Spotify and Apple, and I know that I'm working on it. But so we did read this last week. You can watch the stream on the channel. It was like a bonus part of the episode about the Trans Feminist Manifesto. So it really does depend on the feminist groups you're talking about. It depends on whether or not they're anti-capitalist, whether or not they're going to get along well with the queers.
Is this part of a trend or something?
I guess they're trying to make it a trend, it appears. And they have a few friends who are involved. You can look on their Instagram. It's apparently kind of a subset or a form of what they call ecosexuality. Maybe they made this term up too. They probably did. The paper defines that as people who find nature romantic, sensual, erotic, or sexy, or people who imagine sex as an ecology that extends beyond the physical body.
So Mizakan is reading the paper that they're talking about. And Mizakan is about to tell us more about this paper than Colin Wright has told us about this paper in this entire podcast, because Mizakan actually knows what he's talking about. The institution of marriage is a metaphor for more than human relationality and as a political platform to inspire exploring other institutionalizing ways for advocating for the rights of nature. So what did I say at the beginning? The paper was a political statement that Colin Wright didn't understand because he didn't understand how they were defining the words. And now Mizakan's actually reading the paper that I don't even think Colin Wright has read. And he's telling us, yeah, the paper is a political metaphor. It's a fucking metaphor. It's a political statement. I know. This is sad. It's sad that people watch this. It's sad that this is where people get their information from. This is why we all need to work together to get more people to come over and watch this content. Listen, I will make a commitment. I will be nicer on the whole to everyone if you guys can help me bring more people over to watch my content so that they're not getting their information from dog shit like this. I will be significantly nicer. I will try my very best not to yell at people. I won't block as many people. I'll be more conciliatory when people say dumb things in my chat and break my rules. But this is unacceptable. This is an unacceptable source of information. These two have no effing clue what they're talking about. 35,000 people have watched this video. There is no reason that those people shouldn't be over here. So if I've ever yelled at you before, I'm sorry. We need to put all that behind us. I will try very hard not to yell at you again. If you say something dumb, I don't make any guarantees. But we all have a bigger enemy, and it's people like this.
Oh, okay, I guess. Well, let's talk about the goal of this paper, right? Papers are supposed to have a goal. They're supposed to be trying to research or inform people about something. What was the goal of this paper, Colin?
You would expect papers to have a really identifiable goal.
Yeah, Beards and a Wurzelroot are better than
this. Was the case. But in this case, it's actually pretty difficult to articulate what the goal is. Given the author's paper, it consists of really, really dense...
Wait. It's pretty difficult to articulate what the goal is. Colin, a member of my community, read the paper while we were listening to you ramble on about it and was able to articulate the goal in a single sentence. The institution of marriage is a metaphor for more than human relationality and as a political platform to inspire exploring other ways institutionalizing for, to inspire exploring other institutionalizing ways. Sometimes I have dyslexia. To inspire exploring other institutionalizing ways for advocating for the rights of nature. That is the goal of the paper, Colin. You're supposed to be some big PhD expert that knows everything about everything. Why is it that my community member can articulate the goal of that paper in a single effing sentence and you cannot? Let's listen to him flub that again, shall we?
When I was in science, this was the case. But in this case, it's actually pretty difficult to articulate what the goal is. Given the author's paper, it consists of really, really dense woke jargon that's very rambling. I mean,
Oh
we'll
my
just read what the
God.
author says herself.
Guys, it's just too hard to understand that woke This is the perfect freeze frame. Guys, it's just too hard to understand all that woke jargon. It's just so complicated. There's no one on earth that can actually understand that woke jargon. Are you shitting me? This is a person commenting on my mental health. This is a person running around the internet saying, she's crazy, she's the worst, she's mentally ill. Bro, at least I know how to speak their language. At least I can read papers written by them. At least I can break this stuff down and teach it to other people. At least I take the time to understand what I'm talking about before I mouth off on the internet. You might not like that I'm obviously and clearly so much more powerful than you. It's not even funny. But I think we can all agree that between the two of us, I was able to guess what this paper was about without even looking at it, because I've heard that much queer jargon in my life. And you, having taken time with it, made it your job to analyze it, have no fucking clue what it said because you don't understand the language.
About the paper's goal. It's in this introduction part here. So the author says, again, this is bizarre. This is a love story that aims to change narratives about the Great Salt Lake through how people imagine brine shrimp in science, culture, and art. It explores the concept of hydrosexuality to mediate between these realms, enhancing feminist blue post-humanities and feminist biology with the art-based practices of queer advocacy you might not have heard before.
Here, let's get an interpretation from Mizakan. Overall, this is part of queer ecology and queer ecofeminism, which seeks to connect patriarchy with extra activism. The paper is about how shrimp are seen as just a resource. That is what that's about, Colin. That's what that's about. Right there. Not hard.
Definitely hadn't heard of that before.
You're gonna have to break that down for me, because I think I could probably read that about 10 times and still not know quite what it's intended to convey.
Oh my God.
I think often with papers like this, that's kind of the point. She uses this dense jargon as a stand-in for real academic rigor. As well, I think there's a heavy signaling component where it signals your adherence to a certain political ideology as well. So when you have vacuous ideas, you tend to just dress them down with all this jargon to like sound really profound. The paper, it begins kind of sounding like it's going to start off being normal by discussing an ecological crisis that's facing the Utah's Great Salt Lake. But it very quickly, and I mean very quickly, veers into the discussions we mentioned about hydrosexuality and how it's challenging these, what it calls, quote, hegemonic notion of the autonomous and bounded human subject by embracing what she calls, again, this is in the paper, watery thinking. So not making any of this up. She also claims to be using a thing called hydrophilic logic. I didn't know that was a thing, to criticize what she calls the Capitalicene, which again is just a made-up term, made-up geological era that signifies the rise of capitalism and the fossil fuel industry.
The paper literally used the word capitalism. And Colin Wright still understands so little about queer ideology that he didn't understand what he was reading. This is a paper about queering science. This is a paper about I'm betting this is a paper about decolonizing science, right? I bet they didn't use the word decolonization specifically, but like that's what this is about. This is some sort of metaphor and allegory with the goal of decolonizing science and queering science, which Colin Wright doesn't understand why that has to do with capitalism, because Colin Wright doesn't understand that the goal of queer is the annihilation of capitalism. Oh my God.
So somehow viewing water as this non-binary substance, according to her, helps us facilitate, and I quote, a transition of a human desire from possessing nature to partnering and thriving for a
The water being non-binary means the water is anti-capitalist, which means we're transitioning the human mindset from being something that owns nature as private property to seeing it as something that we are all a part of in a big, beautiful ecosystem. And that is what queering means. He has no fucking clue. To guide the reclamation of the future and restoration of agency to the wildlife of Great Salt Lake, it is necessary to It does. The paper fucking literally says decolonization. Are you shitting me? Are you shitting me? The paper, I didn't think the paper was actually going to say decolonization. The paper actually says decolonization. Oh my God. If people are new here and they don't understand why I'm shocked and they don't understand why my audience is shocked, please ask questions. If you're watching the video later, please leave a comment if you don't understand. I mean that. I will explain this more if people don't understand, but like for people who have been watching queer stuff with me for years now, this is literally shocking. It is literally you, and you don't understand this if you haven't been deep in this content, but this is shockingly bad.
multi-species survival of the blue planet.
I mean, I guess it's technically true that water is neither male nor female.
That's not what they're arguing. That's not what they're arguing.
The
at
author,
all.
I mean, doesn't stop there at the craziness. The author also argues that the brine shrimps, what they call swirly sexuality, yes, she uses that term, and no, it's again not a real thing, and their reproductive versatility that they have, they call this a triumph over binary thinking, which apparently makes these things like paragons of queer resilience that subvert the oppressive structures of settler colonial science. Again, we just got more buzzwords coming out here.
Oh God, I'm not even sure I want to ask this, but
settler colonial science is just a buzzword that doesn't actually mean anything. No, Colin, it does mean something. It does. It means the colonizers, the capitalists, the bourgeois came in and took the private property from the oppressed. In this case, what they're saying is human beings came in and said they owned everything in the Great Salt Lake as their private property. And so they saw themselves as the owners of that thing. That is what capitalism is. It is private property ownership. And what they are arguing is that we need to remove the entitlement of ownership that we have over these things so we can be more in collective solidarity with nature and all that bullshit, because we will be caretakers, better caretakers of the land and of the resources if we all see ourselves in collective solidarity rather than as patriarchal owners of the property. That is what they're saying, asshole. That's what settler colonism is. Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
What is settler colonial science supposed to mean exactly?
Yeah, Colin, what does that mean?
Yeah, this is a new, well, I guess not completely new, but it's becoming more prevalent. For those wondering, it's simply science. When we talk about what settler colonial science is, they just frame it in this settler colonial way because they want to portray science as just kind of one of many equivalent ways of knowing, one that's Western and therefore rooted in racism and other extremely problematic things. Ultimately, they want to promote these mystical and mythological belief systems in other cultures
Gnosticism
as somehow being
it's
equivalent to modern science.
Does anyone have anything they'd like to say in the chat? Yeah, that was a big wrong, Colin. You could have just said that you had no fucking idea what you were talking about, Colin. Anyone who has ever watched Queer Marxism with me knows you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. You don't even know how capitalism is related to any of this, even though it literally says capitalism in the paper. You don't know how decolonization or settler colonialism is related to any of this because you didn't bother to actually learn what those words mean. I need to finish my fucking socialist dictionary, because if I finish my socialist dictionary, there would be no excuse for anyone to not know these words. And we even got a little Gnostic surprise. These are just mythical beliefs that don't actually mean anything. No, Colin, completely wrong. They do mean something, and it is literally your fucking job, asshole, to know what they mean.
Yeah, that sounds familiar. It kind of sounds like cultural relativism applied to science. All the ways of knowing are equal, and including the ones that are made up and the ones that are actual.
I can forgive Brad for not knowing what any of this stuff means. This is not the beat that Brad covers, okay? And I think he's coming across as rather dumb in this. And quite frankly, I've seen Brad Polumbo be much smarter than this, so I don't know why he's acting dumb. Because he is not a dumb person, but he is coming across as incredibly dumb in this video. And I really think he shouldn't do that anymore, because I've seen him be much smarter than this. But Colin Wright has absolutely no excuse. It is his job to understand this. Understanding the brine shrimp reproductive system within the Great Salt Lake environment and beyond deserves special attention when studying Utah's capitalist strategies. So it says capitalism in the paper again. Colin Wright has no fucking idea what they're talking about.
Actually scientific. But let's try to give the devil her due here. Oh, geez, I guess I should say their due here. Is this something worth studying?
I mean, brine shrimp.
Do you even know what they're studying?
And ecology is worth studying. Water is worth studying. Ecosystems, all these things. Conservation of brine shrimp. This is certainly a legitimate endeavor if that's what you value, for sure.
Yeah, and she seems to really value it, like a little too much.
Yes,
that's not what she's
in the video we're playing later
at all.
On. So really, the problem with this paper, though, isn't really the object of study. You know, brine shrimp. It's just an animal. It's fine. There's scientists. There's plenty of brine shrimp papers you can read that are
not
totally
studying
legitimate.
brine shrimp.
The problem really comes down to the paper's methodology. So just to put it simply, the postmodern critical theory approach, not just to brine shrimp, but any subject, is, I would say, entirely useless and incapable of coming to really any objective conclusions about anything. Because the results of these studies, they're never clear. They simply consist of kind of this like a complex word vomit that's used to justify the author's preferred conclusions or a pet political project of some sort.
Exactly.
Yeah, for sure. How did they exactly do this study?
Calling it a study is we're already kind of giving them too much benefit of the doubt here. So I think it's important to convey,
just so we're clear, if you've never actually seen an academic paper before, in every single academic paper that gets published in any reputable journal at all, there is a section labeled methodology that clearly lays out the methodology. So why hasn't Colin Wright actually talked about the methodology yet? I'm convinced he didn't actually read this paper.
Like how the methods of postmodern, social justice papers like this differ from empirical science. So in like a real science paper, you have, there's sections here. There's the broad introduction to an area of study that gradually narrows its scope until by the end, it really kind of narrows it down and highlights a specific problem that justifies the study and outlines the study's objectives. This is often where the scientists will outline the hypotheses it'll be testing. Okay, then you have something called a methods section. This
Sadly, I'm just getting a water and not a beer.
Experimental setup and the procedures and materials, techniques, everything, really so that anyone reading the study, they can try to replicate and do the study themselves. This is a very important part of science, replication. Following this is a results section, presenting the findings of the study in a very clear and organized manner. Usually they'll be using either through text, they're explaining, or logic, through tables and also figures that help visualize what they found. And then you have a discussion section, and this is where the authors interpret the results in the context of research, their research questions and hypotheses. So they convey the implications of their findings, how it relates to previous research and its significance. It's where they discuss, also common in science, is the limitations of the study that we just did. Like, no study is going to be perfect. Here are the limitations, and here's what I'm going to do in the future, or what other future scientists can try to do as well. Okay, that's how a study should be presented. It's highly structured, and importantly, it's easy to evaluate by another
Sounds
scientist.
very settler colonial to me, Colin.
No, it depends on who you ask, I suppose. If you ask the brine shrimp. As I mentioned, it's really easy to analyze these types of papers because they're really structured. You can look at the data. Like, transparency is just paramount here. They're trying to say, here's everything we did. Please pick it apart with a fine-tooth comb, and we can get to the idea and both struggle to find out what's true. But loving the brine shrimp, it doesn't bear any resemblance
What's
to
the methodology?
what I just laid out in like a traditional scientific study. The paper contains no data whatsoever, no tables, no graphs. It doesn't highlight.
So it was a qualitative paper, and qualitative paper. Mizakan, does this have a method? Is there anything about the methodology in this paper? Because I'm a qualitative researcher, and I promise you qualitative papers still have methodologies.
Or quantify any problem, and it doesn't attempt to evaluate any outcomes of the research. There's not a results section.
That's not how qualitative papers work.
And instead of doing any sort of real science, it just constructs narratives, and the narratives
so there
aren't even backed up with empirical evidence, really, because empirical evidence that can be quantified, it's considered one of those oppressive structures of settler colonial science that they need to destruct. So it relies really entirely on a sort of subjective lived experience.
Kind of seems like building all your conclusions around like lived experience or my truth seems like that would be bad in a research setting.
Oh my
what
god!
Do I know?
Oh my god!
It
this
is
so
this
painful.
is the exact opposite of what we're taught in graduate school about how to do studies. But
this is okay. Can you guys be honest with me for a second? I really need everyone to be honest with me. I need everyone to dig in. Okay. It's not this painful to watch me, right? Like, if it's this painful to watch me, you guys need to tell me, and I either need to figure out a way to fix it or I need to start doing something else, because like the feeling I have watching these two, like, I never want to be this. I know maybe like I have my moments, man. I know sometimes I probably have off streams and stuff like that. I'm talking about like on the whole, like I feel like I'm more interesting than these people. I feel like I'm more charismatic than these people. I feel like I have many more original ideas than these people. I mean, maybe I don't show my tits as much as you might like me to, and that's certainly a criticism that you've given me from time to time. But like, I think that tell me it's not like this to watch me. Just can someone please just validate me? Can someone like, I know we're watching them right now, but that's not my fault. That's their fault. Yeah, we would rather watch Literal Socialist, right? I don't even think he's that hot. I really don't. I don't think he's that hot. That's a fair point. Many of you guys are here a lot. Okay. Okay. See, this is a nice compliment. I'm worth listening to even when it's painful. I appreciate that. Okay. All right.
But in this type of research, though, what they're doing, it's not viewed as a deficiency at all. It's actually considered this strength because they believe that oppression makes people more aware of or awake to.
I might yell at people, but at least I'm telling the truth. And it's because of shit like this. This is what makes me yell. This is what makes me yell. Right here. This is what makes me yell.
Woke to the structures of their oppression.
And clearly, since these authors check off so many boxes with their non-binary hydrosexuality, they must have come up with purely objective conclusions since they're so awake, right?
Yeah. So for them, the more, as you said, the more oppressions you can kind of tick off, it makes you closer to becoming, closer and closer to an oracle who really cannot be questioned. You can, in the paper, you can see the author simply making up
more of a commentary,
random associations and passing them off as some sort of just foregone conclusion. It's just this proof just because.
So it's like a letter to the editor, basically. Like it's like an op-ed. They're expressing it. It's like a magazine. Okay, that makes more sense.
This is something that she dreamt up. So, for instance, she asserts that simply naming a species reflects what she calls a, quote, biology of empire that erases indigenous ways of knowing.
Hold up. She's actually saying it's bad to name species. I mean, what are we supposed to do? To identify and catalog and learn about
Oh
them?
my God!
Yeah, and this is what
She says it's bad to categorize species. If only Colin and Brad understood why she said it's bad to categorize species, which, by the way, we just learned yesterday on Counter-Revolutionary Book Club. We've seen this appear many times, because the minute you create categories is the minute that you create oppression. They want to eliminate all categories, because only in eliminating all categories can they eliminate all hierarchy. That's what capitalism is. That's what capitalism is. Capitalism is a hierarchy. They want to eliminate all hierarchy. In order to do that, they need to eliminate all categories. It always comes back to the same things.
what scientists do. We want to name things that are different because we need to be able to separate the world into measurable components so we can make accurate observations and describe things.
It's going completely
so
over.
There's really no
it is.
answer to the question of what we're supposed to do here. I mean, queer theory, it only problematizes things. It's not in the business of proposing better alternatives. So in science, we always have like an alternative.
Are you serious, Colin? The elimination of the categories is the better alternative. Colin, when they talked about decolonizing in the paper that you're analyzing right now, decolonization is the alternative. They just don't actually promote they don't say what they're going to do. They don't promote any vision. They don't promote any alternative. You have literally talked about the alternatives that they're promoting, bro. They're telling you what they're promoting. You don't understand what you are reading.
Alternative hypothesis is like, if we find this not to be true, then this other thing must be true, or these other things must be true. It's this process of elimination.
Well, no, they don't actually, and they specifically write about the fact that they don't. And we specifically read a paper yesterday about the elimination of all categories. So you maybe haven't been around in a while, but if you think they really like their categories, it's because you haven't been around and you haven't been paying attention to the content. Because they say all the time they don't like the categories, they want to get rid of the categories. Non-binary is a way of getting themselves out of the category, but eventually they even want to eliminate the category of non-binary. So my advice to you would be to stop listening to whatever conservative influencers you're listening to, because they don't know what they're talking about. And if you come back over here and stop listening to people who are lying to you, you will see very clearly that they do want to get rid of all their categories.
That's not what queer theorists do at all. So the author, she also condemns...
I mean, I stream at the same time every day. I tell you guys all the time, YouTube unsubscribes people from my channel every day. YouTube stops notifying people of the streams. I have put together a Telegram group where people can sign up to get notifications. I put together a Substack where people can sign up and get notifications. It's thecult.substack.com. I stream at the same time every single day. I'm not unsympathetic to the fact that YouTube doesn't notify you of things, but I can't control that. And so I don't actually accept it as an excuse when I do so much to make sure that people know that I stream at the same time every day. You can get these notifications elsewhere. I can't control YouTube. I have no power here. So now you know. You know I stream at 5 p.m. Monday through Friday. You know I stream on Saturdays at 6 p.m. You know there's a Telegram group you can join to get notifications. You know there's a Substack you can sign up for to get notifications. You can turn on notifications on Twitter. You can double check and make sure notifications are turned on the channel. You can turn on Rumble and do it there. There are any number of solutions to this problem. And none of those solutions are going to change the fact that the left does want to get rid of all categories, and they talk about it all the time. And if you come back and watch the streams, you'll see that.
The commercialization of brine shrimp, particularly how they're used in food products. And you remember that, like that popular, it was like a toy. It was like the sea monkey's pet marketed to kids.
Yeah,
She also slams that. She says these things constitute a type of environmental violence. And this is a term that appears to mean anything she dislikes about human interactions with water-based ecosystems.
That's always kind of scary to me when they start labeling things as violence, the radical activist types.
I agree. It often goes way overboard and out of control. So I bet you didn't think it was possible for things to get even weirder, but they're actually about to with this paper.
Oh, gosh.
Okay.
We've already gone over hydrosexual love and watery thinking, so how could this get worse? Towards the end of the paper, it includes a section titled Cyber Wedding to the Brine Shrimp, which was this event that was staged on the shores of the Great Salt Lake. It involved artists, it involved scientists, and even augmented reality brine shrimp. So during this performance, the participants, they made wedding vows, not to each other, but to the brine shrimp. They marched in a procession, and they finished with a communal bath in the lake itself. And the authors describe this in the paper as making love to the lake. Okay, and by expressing this love and commitment to the brine shrimp, and apparently also the lake, the participants, they hope to challenge what they called capitalist commodification and foster multi-species solidarity.
We actually have video of this.
They're making a political statement that is anti-capitalist in nature, you raging retard.
Wedding, I guess we have to call it. And we're going to show you a clip of that right here, guys.
We are gathered here today to celebrate the wedding of the brine shrimp, Artemia franciscana, to the ecosexuals. Great Salt Lake welcomes you to marry one of its most important species.
Through this wedding, may I be transformed from land art into hydro-feminist environmental art.
Justina and Evelina, we now pronounce you married to the bride shrimp. Congratulations. May we kiss the bride?
Yeah, yes, let's kiss the bride.
Do you have any idea what we just watched, Colin?
I think I blacked out.
It was
halfway through that. I'm
performance
not sure.
art
I
is what
glazed
we
over.
just watched.
Hope the viewers didn't, and they're still there.
So let's talk about the conclusions, right? Because
So he has no idea what we just watched. They're mocking the institution of marriage as a propertied relationship via performance art because they are queer Marxists and they do not believe in the propertied institution of marriage. And so they are mocking it by getting married to a shrimp in a fake ceremony. It is performance art that is anti-capitalist in nature to mock the idea of marriage as a propertied relationship. That is what that is. It is emphasizing that human beings have colonized the Great Salt Lake and made it their private property, and their goal is to decolonize it, which is to remove the propertied relationship. It is mocking the institution of marriage using some weird performance art bullshit. But I'm the crazy one, and Colin Wright knows exactly what he's talking about. Okay. Oh, look at this. The author mentions the sea monkey advertisements from the 80s where they were portrayed as a nuclear family. So they were mocking the idea of marriage and the nuclear family as propertied relationships via performance art. Is this really hard, Colin? Is this too much for you, Colin? Big time smart PhD fellow with the Manhattan Institute doesn't understand the basics of queer theory.
My apparently naive view of science was that it's supposed to have conclusions. Did this research actually reach any?
Nope. there were no conclusions. Again, because this wasn't a study in any sense of the word. The only things that resembled a conclusion was in a section near the end called an outro, which I've never heard as a section of scientific paper. So here's what the authors concluded in their words. So quoting them, by assuming a hydrosexual position, this paper specifically amplified the argument for preserving terminal lakes from the outset. This was perpetrated by engaging art in changing imaginaries and offering alternatives to activities such as looking, probing, cutting open, labeling, and displaying.
They were queering the nuclear family by creating a family of choice by marrying the shrimp in a fake ceremony that was meant to mock and satirize the idea of marriage.
The art-based alternatives were designed to envision brine shrimp as bodies that matter and as climate experts, crucial for the ecosystem to survive. So take from that what you will.
So I will take something from that for sure. Perhaps a little bit of trauma or some nightmares, but what's the significance of this? Like, does this connect to a broader problem in academia?
Absolutely. I think, we're approaching this paper with humor because it's, well, I mean, it is legitimately funny, but it's also better to laugh sometimes than cry at the things like this. But its publication does raise very serious questions about the state of academic peer review. For instance, how did an absurd article like this make it through the editorial process? What does such a process even look like for the peer reviewers? I'm assuming they watched the video of the cyber wedding. How are they peer reviewing that? Are journals so desperate to appear progressive that they'll publish anything cloaked in the language of decolonization
You think
and
that's
queerness?
progressive?
I think the answer to that question and the others you just raised appears to be yes, but at least it's a good thing, Colin. We don't have a public crisis of trust in science and scientific institutions or anything. Oh, wait, we literally do. So
it's dismal right now. And papers like this, they undermine the credibility of other legitimate scholarship. So that's why I try to call these types of things out so much on X. So when the most basic standards of coherence and relevance are abandoned, how can we
see? People wonder why I'm so angry all the time. And I'm trying to get better about that. I've come to like a form of acceptance with the amount of bullshit that goes on. But one of the things that made me so angry for years was that none of these people actually care about this stuff. They talk about it all the time. None of them care about it enough to figure out what the fuck it actually is. And when you put the information right in front of them, they go, you're crazy, you're mentally ill, you're a leftist. Like, the amount of times that I heard that for showing people video of what the left was saying, it's like, you don't actually care. Don't pretend you care. I'm putting it right in front of you. It's very clear. You're not stupid. You just don't give a fuck.
Expect the public to, the buzzword phrase, trust the science on important issues like the biology of sex, which we've been grappling with for a long time, or other major big public health issues. Like, we just went through a big pandemic. And if our experts are there marrying brine shrimp, I don't know what to even say about that. So as we'll show in this ongoing series, these papers, they really aren't outliers. I go through Google Scholar and I find these things, and they just showing up on page one. I'm sorting them by date, so the new ones come up, and we could do multiple episodes every day on these types of things. So many of them aren't quite as cartoonishly silly as this one, but they are published every day.
Yeah, there is no shortage of these kinds of insane papers, and we're going to dive into them for your entertainment pleasure, no matter how many brain cells it costs us, on this new podcast. And the next paper we're talking about is honestly less funny and frankly kind of creepy, but it's about an academic who thinks there's such thing as queer babies. Yes, seriously. Now, this is the part of the show where you will normally...
Pop quiz for the chat. What does it mean that there are queer babies? Do we want to take a guess about what this means and about how much that Colin, Wright, and Brad are going to get wrong about this? Does anyone want to take a guess? What do queer babies mean? Oh yeah, this is the part. Oh, it's gonna get worse, isn't it? I'm gonna yell. I'm already losing my voice. I've been yelling for 2.5 hours. Yeah, we are in Podcapistan right now, where really there should be better gatekeepers on Colin Wright, because he really should not be allowed to talk on the internet about any of this stuff at all, because he obviously hasn't done any due diligence to understand what he's talking about. What do queer babies mean? Babies are queer because they aren't institutionalized into capitalism yet. Children not being put into the gender binary, so like babies. Babies don't have internalized capitalism, maybe. They're trying to queer the nuclear family to disrupt social reproduction theory because the nuclear family upholds capitalism. Babies that don't have gender, yeah, that could be a possibility. Lots of good ideas. Kids being raised to reject capitalism and the gender binary. Queer babies might mean babies who haven't been socialized into hierarchical capitalist thinking and norms. That could be babies gestated in incubators to overthrow the nuclear family. Aha! You are paying attention. You're taking a guess. Kids raised by queer in a non-nuclear family, they aren't voluntarily involved in capitalism. The nibblings, they aren't capitalist yet. Let's see. All we had to hear was queer babies to know what this paper was about, Colin. So let's see what you think this paper's about.
Emily hit a paywall. Basically, we're bringing you 2 of these stories a week, but only people who sign up at the Substack linked in the description and donate $6.99 a month will get access to both stories, the full extended show. If not, you'll just have to make do with one story, one paper, one deep dive, and you won't get to know about the crazier things like the queer babies or the people who somehow believe that that's...
Or you can sign up on my Substack. That is Karlyn, KARLYN.substack.com for $8 a month, $80 a year. And not only will I show you way crazier shit than this, not only will I keep that content free for everyone so everyone can learn, but I will actually break it down and explain it in a way that is completely accurately how the left would interpret it, because we actually understand what queer activism is, unlike Brad and Colin. So you guys are welcome to go pay them money for these cringe breakdowns where they don't actually explain anything because they don't know what they're talking about. Or you could come pay me money and I'll explain it all and break it down and give you way more crazy shit than this.
Anything other than a creepy concept. But for the first week, no paywall, so you can get a sense of what we're doing with the new show and decide if you want to sign up. Okay, Colin, with that out of the way, we got to talk about something kind of disturbing. I can see this paper's title here, like I mentioned, is Queering Babies, Autoethnographic Reflections from a Gay Parent Through Surrogacy. Do you have a translation for us what that means?
Yeah, we'll have to get into this by using some of the terminology from some of this stuff. So we'll talk about ethnographies, what those are, and how an autoethnography is. But really, it just kind of talks about surrogacy. We all know what this is through a gay parent's lens. But also we'll see through a very queer theory lens as well.
At the most surface level, how would you summarize the paper?
Yeah,
so
Colin.
I think this paper, it attempts to establish the notion that surrogate babies are, what it says, queer creatures by default, and that perhaps even that all babies are inherently queer.
As a reminder, for people who may not know, I have literally been covering for years about how Abolish the Family activists want all children to be born via surrogacy, because one of the ways they want to destroy the nuclear family is by having all children birthed via surrogacy. They advocate for surrogacy all the time. One of the titles of Sophie Lewis's books is called Full Surrogacy Now. They also believe that we should all be surrogates for each other. Being a surrogate for each other basically means that you are living an anti-capitalist lifestyle where you're taking care of each other outside of the confines of the oppressive capitalist system and yada, 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 blah, blah, blah. But that's what they're talking about, Colin. That's what they're talking about. We've covered this for years on this channel, bro. Where were you? Where were you when the evidence was being put right in front of your nose and you refused to listen?
We briefly touched on queer theory before when discussing the brine shrimp article, and we'll get into that a bit more detail later on in this piece.
Yes, well, unironically, Dave Rubin's kids are considered to be queer by queer Marxists because they were born via surrogacy, which means that they disrupted the traditional nuclear family. But Dave and his husband, who's also named David, are raising their kids in a very capitalist environment. So they're probably not queer anymore, but indeed they were born in a very queer way.
So, who is the author that came up with this brilliant and not at all incredibly creepy idea that babies are queer? Who is this piece of work?
Yeah, I'm totally going to butcher his name, but I'm going to do my best. His name appears to be Balas Boros, who is an assistant professor in, you might guess, gender, health, and cross media at the University of Amsterdam, of all places, which might actually explain a lot of the weirdness that we're about to dive into.
I was in Amsterdam not too long ago, and I think he might have written this paper after having spent too much time in their coffee shops. If you know, you know.
So they're saying that queer Marxists only write this because they're doing mushrooms. I promise you there's way crazier shit than this that is not published in Amsterdam. Although Europe does tend to be a little bit more crazy with the queer stuff than America is. But like, it's not because they're on drugs, I promise you. In fact, I would recommend they start doing drugs because they'd probably be a lot less crazy and a lot more less dangerous if they did.
No. Now, where was this paper published exactly? Because wherever it was, I have questions about their vetting process.
It was published in a journal called Psychoanalysis, Culture, and Society, which
is so
unfortunately, like Loving the Brine Shrimp, it's also owned by that academic publishing giant Springer Nature. Again, not an obscure ad hoc journal created by some tiny community to publish strange papers the mainstream won't touch. It doesn't get much more mainstream than Springer Nature.
That is extremely depressing. But from the title alone, I can already tell that us normies are going to need some help working our way through this paper. What terms do we need to understand in order to try to decipher this very strange piece of work?
So I think the main one is going to be queer theory. So we talked about what it means for an individual to be queer.
No,
in
you
the Brine
didn't.
Shrimp paper.
No, you didn't.
But queer theory is a little different. I mean, of course, it's related. It really emerged. It's a field that emerged from the gender and sexuality studies. And it really kind of puts itself out to challenge traditional views on sexuality and sex or gender by questioning the
queer theory, according to Colin Wright, is about challenging traditional views on sexuality. Well, I guess in a roundabout way, Colin, that's true, but you're going to say it's about being gay when it's not about being gay at all. Again.
Sexuality studies. And it really kind of puts itself out to challenge traditional views on sexuality and sex or gender by questioning the notions that these represent fixed binary categories like male or female,
so close,
or man or woman, or gay or straight,
so
things like that. So it believes
Colin,
that just making these categories, talking about these categories, it thinks these are created by people who are in places of power to
look at that, shall we? Was that a rare moment of clarity, Colin? Was that a rare moment of clarity? Queer theory wants to abolish all categories because they think the categories were created by people in positions of power. So close, Colin. So close. But you know what? The thing of it is, the fact that he just said that sentence, that also makes me wonder if he actually knows more than he's saying right now and he's purposefully behaving like a retard. Because it's like one of two things are true. Either Colin Wright understands what he's talking about or he doesn't. And if he understands what he's talking about, which the fact that he understands on some level they want to eliminate all categories, like if he understands that, then is he just playing dumb for the rest of this? And why is he playing dumb? And if he doesn't understand it, and maybe he just lucked into a sentence that was actually correct, maybe he read that sentence from somewhere else and didn't actually understand what it means. But like, either he's actually stupid or he's pretending to be stupid. And I'm not sure which one of those is worse. It might actually be worse to pretend to not understand this stuff if you do than to just actually be completely ignorant.
Press the less powerful. Instead of binaries, we see queer theory. It really attempts to assert that all these categories, I mean, really every natural category in nature, that it's fluid or exists along some sort of a spectrum.
Ah, yes, queer theory, the lovely and not at all incoherent birthplace of ideas like non-binary and fun little propaganda pieces like my personal favorite, the gender unicorn.
And there's gender elephants and clouds and giraffes as well. I mean, yeah, so this is exactly where we get the notions of sex being a spectrum. It's right out of queer theory. Or the existence of people who have just, non-standard appearing genitalia, who have differences of sexual development. And I mean, non-binary came about, I guess, to retroactively trans people like David Bowie who wore makeup or something. So another term, I think.
Non-binary came out to retroactively trans people like David Bowie because he wore makeup. No, Colin. No. That's not why non-binary came about, Colin. Non-binary came about to reject the categories of men and women because the goal of queer Marxists is to abolish all gender, to create a world of non-binary. Because only in creating a world of non-binary do you get to abolish capitalism. That is what the goal is. That's a great question for them, Lars. Why aren't they mentioning capitalism? It's literally written in the papers that he's reading, but he doesn't understand how it's related.
We're going to take away from this title that's important to understand is autoethnography, okay? This is an important one, really, really important. I think a lot of us are familiar with the concept of ethnography, which is a research method that is used by a lot of cultural anthropologists. It involves really immersing yourself in a culture or a community that's different from your own in order to study and understand its practices, its beliefs, the behaviors, and the social interactions that we see in these societies. So it's fundamentally about
what we kind of do on this channel is a little bit, it's like a virtual version of an ethnography. It's not exactly that, because a true ethnography would be us living with the queer Marxists and going to all the queer Marxist events and stuff like that. But we kind of what I do actually try to do is replicate an ethnography in the way that I'm able to by immersing ourselves in their events and things like that. Because when you immerse yourself, and this is a form of qualitative research, it is actually a valid form of research. They're going to try to shit on it, but like, we need qualitative research in order to understand human experiences. And so one of the ways you can do that is by immersing yourself within the subculture, which is what I've tried to replicate in my work.
Observing and documenting others.
And just generally speaking, would you say that ethnography is a legitimate form of inquiry?
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's an essential way to study other cultures, for sure. It's an ethnography. The research aims for objectively stepping outside of your own context to understand another's. The emphasis is on the culture or community being studied, not on the researcher themselves. So, I mean, they often collect data in the form of things like observations or interviews and looking at artifacts and that type of stuff. Really important. The researcher tries to kind of blend into the society as well, become a part of the community, because if you're just like this conspicuous outsider, like the only really pasty white guy in a trying to study a tribe in Africa, like they're going to notice you and they might change their behavior if you're there. And so you want to try to make sure that you're not influencing their behavior. You're getting sort of a really organic experience of what they're doing. It helps you gain like a deeper insight.
True.
And when you're doing an ethnography, the outcome, the product of this research, it's usually something like a very detailed description or some sort of analysis of the culture's community life from an outsider perspective. The goal is representing this group as authentically as possible.
See, that's
yeah,
what we
that
do.
makes sense. And at least they're actually trying to objectively analyze something, which already makes it better than the shrimp wedding.
If only Colin Wright maybe took the time to talk to the only person that I know of on the fucking internet who's studying the far left from an ethnographic perspective, maybe Colin Wright would know a little bit more than he currently does about the far left had he listened to the person conducting the long-term ethnographic study of far left subcultures. But no, Colin Wright didn't want to bother to understand that because it didn't fit Colin Wright's narrative. Also, remember, Colin Wright is marrying a porn star in the form of Christina Buttons. And Christina Buttons didn't like me because I was significantly smarter than her. And so, of course, Colin Wright can't acknowledge the long-term ethnographic study that I've been doing into the far left and the mountains and mountains and mountains of documentation that I have, because he's fucking a hardcore porn star and he wants to keep fucking the hardcore porn star. And even though she doesn't produce any really good journalism or have any interesting insights at all, you know, he's getting pussy. And so that's really all that matters at the end of the day. Not about intellectual integrity, not about truth, just about the hardcore porn star pussy.
At least. But what's it mean when they say exactly autoethnography instead of just ethnography?
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, an ethnography, it's trying to do something. There's always going to be some subjectivity that's unavoidable, but the goal of science and of these things is to minimize it as much as possible. So you bring up what the auto is doing to autoethnography. So you might think it's just a small little thing, little prefix in front of it. What's the big deal here? I mean, it makes or breaks the entire thing. So an autoethnography, it throws the objectivity to the wind. It turns the focus, rather than outward towards the society you're studying, it turns it inward and uses the researcher's own subjective experiences, our own emotions, the personal narratives of the author themselves as primary data points. Okay, so the research is essentially just studying themselves in relation to the cultural context that they're observing. This relies heavily on things like self-reflection. And really, the data, if we want to call it that, that's produced is like a diary or a journal. We'll discuss sort of the issues with this.
A diary or a journal is still data. And listen, there is a very valid discussion to be had over what is the value of that data, what insight can that data give us. But don't tell me, like, listen, and again, I'm not defending this particular study, but just like this form of research, human stories matter. They matter. And regardless of whether we agree with someone or whether we disagree with someone or whether we think someone's crazy or whether they are actually crazy, documentation of a human life and a human perspective, it does matter. These are the types of things that carry on. If people are writing down their stories, this is, I mean, every autobiography, like literally every autobiography ever written, every memoir ever written. These stories have value. They give us perspective on the human experience. When people tell us their story, that allows us to look at our story in a different way. So we can have a conversation about how the data is used and what is a valid and invalid and ethical and unethical use of that data. But to say this data has no value, I think is just wrong. It does. It tells us what this person thinks. It tells us what this person believes. It tells us how this person's going to show up in the world. It tells us what this person's likely to do next based on what they believe. We can do a lot of predictive analysis based on things like lived experience. And it has nothing to do with whether or not they're grounded into reality. It has to do with this person believes this is true. And because this person believes that this is true, they're going to act in a certain way. And if other people believe something like that is true, they're going to act in a predictable way. And if we can find a trend in human experiences where it says, generally speaking, if a person sees the world like X, Y, B, and Z, they are going to do A, B, and C, that's valuable information. That's predictive information. That's how we analyze the psychology of social systems.
Oh, I mean, I call it like a navel gazing method a bit later.
I don't know what you're talking about, how there could be any issues. It sounds extremely scientific to me. But okay, what was the objective of this paper about queer babies? God, I hate saying those two words together, but this author's given us no choice.
I think so. He was.
Yeah.
I think
the author wants to establish the queerness not only of surrogate babies, like you do, but babies generally. Okay, and he does this by showing how what he says, calls it non-normative that surrogate babies are, given how they came into the world through artificial means like IVF, or the fact that they have like a biological mother that's not being the mother that gave birth to them. So again, the queer theory aspect tries to highlight like the non-normative weird stuff to create their narratives here. But he also then, as I said, he tries to establish the queerness of all babies. And he does this by claiming that they disrupt adult expectations about how they should, quote, act, develop, respond, or simply be. Okay, but all the author does, all Boros does here, is he seems to be describing is the natural unpredictability and individuality of infants. This is a phenomenon that's so universal that labeling it as queer really adds nothing meaningful to our understanding here.
Oh my God,
and it
Colin.
doesn't just not add anything meaningful to the definition
Wrong
of
again.
understanding. It's also kind of weird to be adding this like vaguely sexual undertone. That's what queer connotates.
No, queer does not connotate a vaguely sexual undertone. Anyone who believes that queer connotates a vaguely sexual undertone does not understand what queer is. Gee, I wonder if Colin Wright is going to correct Brad. Now, I don't begrudge Brad thinking that. Brad is gay. I also think Brad is not as hinged into this stuff as we are. So I can forgive Brad for not knowing what the fuck queer means. But Colin Wright, again, he's put himself in a position where he's supposed to be some sort of expert on this. Is Colin Wright going to correct Brad's completely incorrect assumption that queer has anything to do with sexuality at all? Let's see.
To his analysis of babies, surely I'm not the only one creeped out by that.
Yeah, this is a hard paper to read given the weird, eerie, creepy vibes you get from it.
So they think that queer is about sexualizing babies because they don't understand that queer is a fundamentally an anti-capitalist ideology that is about raising babies outside of the capitalist system, which is about what surrogacy is. Surrogacy is a form of disrupting the nuclear family by removing biological reproduction from it, with which you can use to remove parental rights from it, because parental rights are considered to be a form of private property under capitalism to the far left. That's why they want to get rid of parental rights, and one of the ways they want to do that is via having all children born via surrogacy, because it disrupts the social reproduction of capitalism within the nuclear family. It's all basic 101 level stuff, Colin. Queer in this context has nothing to do with sexuality. This just proves you don't know what you're talking about. This paper has nothing to do with sexuality. This paper has to do with disrupting the nuclear family by disrupting social reproduction theory, by having kids queered by being born via surrogacy. That is what this is about.
I mean, queer theory, it's in the game of making really mundane things, mundane observations seem really profound. So here's what the authors say here.
Oh my God.
Again, talking about the babiness of babies. It says, there is queerness here, the kind of queerness that has to do with how children are always queer from the standpoint of a normal adult. While they are assumed to be heterosexual from the outset, they can at most be not yet straight because they are not allowed to be sexual at all.
What does that mean?
Hang on,
They're not allowed to be.
Hang on, we need to go back. I tried to pause it. It didn't go. Okay. Let's break this down. There is queerness here, the kind of queerness that has to do with Stockton's argument about how children are always queer from the standpoint of a quote-unquote normal adult. What they are saying, Colin, is children are non-normative. They means they haven't been socialized into capitalist cultural norms yet, unlike the quote-unquote normal adult who had them, who has been socialized into capitalist norms. That is why the children are queer. They do not have internalized capitalism yet because they haven't been raised that way. Continuing. While they are assumed to be heterosexual from the outset, they can at most be considered not yet straight because they are not allowed to be sexual at all. What they are saying there is straight does not mean a man and a woman and a woman and a man. Straight is a normative value. Straight means normal. I have them on video saying this. Straight and gay have nothing to do with who you're sleeping with from this regard. It has to do with, are you upholding normative values or not? What they're saying is the children, the babies, have not yet been socialized to uphold normal capitalist values because they're not allowed to even think about having that type of social relationship with other people yet. That is what makes them queer, Colin. That they are not upholding normative values because they have not yet been socialized to uphold the normative values. Let's see what he says.
Allowed to be sexual at all.
What does that mean? They're not allowed to be not sexual? What? No, they're just not.
I know. This is so many parts of this paper, you smack yourself on the forehead. So he seems to be
I'm
suggesting
smacking
that
myself on the
babies
forehead right now.
are
Yeah.
inherently queer because they defy adult categorizations of sexual identities. But I just think this kind of collapses under its own weight, because just thinking about it, infants, they're not yet straight. These are, as you mentioned, they're pre-sexual beings. They're entirely uninterested and incapable of.
It has nothing to do with sex. It has to do with normative values. It has to do about whether or not they're going to uphold normative values.
Any adult notion of identity or orientation, and applying these concepts to infants, babies, it not only distorts the reality of the development of babies, but it just sharply starts veering into this inappropriate territory by sexualing a stage of life that I think is.
It's not arguing that they should be sexualized. When they say queer, that's a good thing. They're not arguing that the children should be sexualized. Of course, this is the way Colin Wright gets clicks on the internet, is he lies to people about queer being about sexualizing kids when it's not about sexualizing kids. In fact, just even following Colin Wright's own logic, he's saying that queer, like what he should be saying is they're not arguing for the sexualization of kids. My God.
Really defined by total innocence.
Yeah, I really didn't think "don't sexualize infants" was something we'd even have to say, but welcome to 2025, I guess.
Yeah, you'd think. Yeah, but this is also where things take a potentially darker turn in the paper. We've already been creepy, but it gets worse.
This is
from here
so
on out.
bad.
It gets very dark because queer theory, again, it's not just concerned with blurring boundaries of natural categories in nature or things like human sexuality.
That's not what it's
but
about.
Also blurring boundaries of what societies consider appropriate or inappropriate. Things like age of consent for sex. So on the surface, one could potentially read this paper as trying to reveal, the sociological complexity of surrogate babies. But there's also this recurring theme in the paper that honestly can only be read as an attempt to sexualize infants.
So
I don't mean
read
to
it.
come off of one of those people on Twitter.
So read it, Colin. Read the section of the paper that's about sexualizing infants. Read the actual text. We'll wait.
They're shouting groomer all the time. But in this case, I think it's impossible to ignore.
So read it.
Yeah, look, I'm also absolutely not one to ever throw those charges around lightly. But at some point, if the shoe fits, wear it.
Read
right?
it.
I mean, so tell us about some of the specific ways this paper sexualizes babies. Gosh.
I'll highlight a few examples here. So near the beginning of the paper, Boros, he portrays normal biologically driven behaviors of babies really through a lens of sexuality and queerness. So for example, he recounts his disturbing here, his daughter's instinctual search for a breast during an early skin-to-skin contact event with him. And he describes the experience as, quote,
Hang on. I'm reading it because I don't trust Colin Wright to actually read this. The only problem was, however, that Greta was not well behaved or well prepared. She didn't like doing skin to skin. She was clearly uncomfortable, if not pissed, and instead of letting me dissolve into the envisioned unity, she impatiently moved towards where she expected to find my breast to suck on. Is he talking about like the... I think he's talking about the, like he's sitting in for the mother or something like that. There wasn't much intimacy or innocence there. Rather, everything felt somewhat animalistic and perverse. All about, okay, you know what? Listen, I'm gonna throw Colin Wright a bone. I'll say I'm wrong if I actually think I'm wrong. That does actually seem sexual, and that's fucked up. And that's not normally the stuff that we find in these types of situations. I would like to see the fuller context to this, but unlike Colin Wright, I will say, you know what? Maybe I was wrong. Maybe he actually did find something sexual. But it also kind of seems like it's about nursing, but they're kind of making it seem sexual. So it reads more sexual than I'm comfortable with, to be honest. But again, like I would actually like to see the full context. But look at what it says. Look at what it says, though. And for the first and last time in our life with Greta, I could not escape from the thought that the situation we gutted ourselves into this baby project was just not natural. So I don't know. Let's hear.
Animalistic and perverse. Okay, so here's a quote from that section. I'll read it for you.
He still doesn't know what queer means, though.
Quote, she didn't like doing skin to skin. She was clearly uncomfortable, if not pissed. And instead of letting me dissolve into the envisioned unity, she impatiently moved towards where she expected to find my breast to suck on. There wasn't much intimacy or innocence there. Rather, everything felt somewhat animalistic and perverse, all about unfulfilled desires. So this description, it totally warps a baby's natural survival behavior, you know, searching for sustenance, into something really unsettling. So by using terms like perverse and focusing on the unfulfilled desires of a newborn, he's projecting these adult notions of sexuality onto an action that is really just instinctual and entirely non-sexual.
Yeah, I can feel my lunch coming back up.
So he continues
Brad is
to
insufferable.
sexualize this primal infant behavior by linking it to broader psychoanalytic and social constructs.
Oh, it's
when he
Freudian.
he says the following. So, quote,
It's Freudian. Queer Marxists love Freud. That's okay. That makes a lot of sense, actually.
a newborn's attraction to breastfeeding disrupts parental anticipation and evokes feelings of alienation and connotations of the sexual. So I find this type of language unnecessary and super inappropriate. He's projecting, you know, his own discomfort and confusion onto his child's actions and creating a really distorted, bizarre narrative that sexualizes the infant.
Yeah, I'm getting the vibe that this could have been a diary entry and potentially never seen the light of day, or honestly, better yet, a conversation with a therapist rather than an academic paper. But that's just me.
Yeah, I mean, they really have no shame. There's things most people might be embarrassed to even write in their own diaries, but this is here in a peer-reviewed journal that's being published online. So, I mean, for the shock value, he even included in this paper an image of a man, not a trans woman, as if that would be better, but a man sitting down breastfeeding a baby. Again, for no apparent other reason than just pure shock value. They believe the very concept of decency itself needs to be abolished, as this concept is, in their view, wielded by those in power meant to oppress others.
I hate you for enticing me to watch this. I hate you. This has been one of the most painful experiences of my life.
Prude, but surely we need to maintain some standards of decency in society.
Not according to queer theorists. You know, any standards are oppressive here.
Ugh.
So, but back to the paper, the author, they even go so far as to frame the connection between parent and child as inherently, quote, gendered and sexual. So I'll read this short section here. So he says, quote, the umbilical cord of, and then they have a strike through, trauma, shared fate, going back to the primal desire to strike out, lactate, connect and stay connected, and the future connection, or this connected future, is always gendered and sexual. So this, again, a truly bizarre statement.
Yeah, that's gross. I don't like this.
I think it reveals sort of the dangers of over-theorizing what are essentially mundane realities. It's insane that I need to say this, but babies don't come with gendered, sexualized futures. These are merely constructs imposed by adults, not inherent of infants.
Yeah, I'm going to go out on a limb and say most people's relationships with their mothers are not, in fact, sexualized, or I guess to some extent it's gendered, because it's like your mother and your father are different based on those gender roles and all that. But the sexual part, like, dude, that might just be you, and you should probably talk to somebody about that.
Yeah, you know, I sense that Freud had kind of a lot of influence on this guy. And Boras, the author here, his portrayal of queerness in infants, it really adds this disturbing subtext of sexualization, because, you know, queerness, as he himself defines it earlier in this paper, it inherently carries connotations of what he calls sexualized strangeness. So if you're therefore,
I mean, listen, I don't know if I could do it. I cannot spend this. This is one of the, I'm serious. I would rather watch Socialism than watch these two every week. This is so painful. And yeah, Brad is acting retarded. And again, I've seen Brad in contexts where he sounds significantly smarter than this, so I don't know why he's acting like a retard on this show, but like, it's so cringe. It's so bad. Hey, Plebeian, thank you for the super chat. Let's see. I went down a similar rabbit hole before finding your work. I was following an old Trotskyist activist and queer member of NAMBLA. I don't want to go to... Come on, I am already literally writing a book about queer Marxism. Am I not? I'm writing 2 fucking books right now about queer Marxism. Am I not punishing myself enough for your entertainment? You want me to go down? No, I don't want to. No. Thank you for the money. I appreciate it. No.
Describing queerness to infants who are, again, incapable of sexual agency. This is totally inappropriate. He's giving the sexualized strangeness to the infants themselves.
Yeah, I'm really not sure he's helping the pro-surrogacy cause with this bizarre paper. In fact, I think he's probably hurting it and giving people who do surrogacy a bad name, because surely 99% of them are not creeps like this guy.
Yeah.
Wow.
There's a big surrogacy debate. I don't really tend to comment on it very much, but after I drew attention to this queering baby study on X, I had several prominent anti-surrogacy authors. They reached out to me, can you give me the paper? And they wrote articles attacking surrogacy because of this. And it's hard to argue with them. They kind of have a point. If this is what people who have surrogate kids are doing, they're taking pictures of it, breastfeeding their offspring and publishing in academic papers. Yeah, we have a problem here for sure.
Yeah, though I would feel pretty confident that that's not what the vast majority are doing.
For sure.
Now, what were the conclusions of this very creepy research?
So, much like the brine shrimp paper, there's no conclusions whatsoever. It's just this jargon-filled rambling about how he
Colin.
established the queerness of babies.
We already told you what the
There's
conclusion was.
not a conclusion, but there's kind of this bizarre send-off near the end, which I'll read for us here. He says, quote, "Perhaps this is why it is hard to talk about the queerness of babies. It resides in the prelingual and in the forgetting, something that might be accessible through involuntary memory or psychoanalysis, but most likely not through curated narratives or readily available anecdotes. What is then left for an empiricist like me is to recreate this limnoid experience of queerness, or to make peace with the sideways of queering." So that's his send-off, and I think it's hilarious that he's trying to call himself some sort of an appearance.
It means to be non-normative or anti-capitalist, Colin. It's not rocket science, bro. They tell you what they mean. That's what he means. He's talking about being non-normative and anti-capitalist.
You're an empiricist at the end of this paper. Brad, how many empiricists do you know who are talking about recreating limnoid experiences and making peace with the sideways of queering?
Yeah, is the empiricist in the room with us? Because I don't think there is one. You already talked about this. The whole point of the autoethnography is that it's not empirical. It's like your truth and your own experiences. So, look, is there a broader problem that this connects to? Like, what's the significance of this beyond just the fact that this one person is creepy and should probably be investigated?
Yeah, I think the most troubling aspect of queering babies is not really the content, although, the content is absurd and unsettling and at times really, really disturbing. But actually, that is the most disturbing
the
part.
Content is pretty darn bad.
The most troubling aspect, that's the most troubling. But secondary to that is the fact that it was, again, published in a peer-reviewed journal by a major academic publisher, Springer Nature. Peer-reviewed journals are supposed to be these gatekeepers that are ensuring only high-quality, rigorously vetted research is being published.
Yeah, this is not quite rigorously vetted.
Yeah, but how can it be? Queering babies, it raises this question similar to brine shrimp. How does one peer review an autoethnography? Because by its very nature, this is like an unchallengeable method because it draws entirely on personal experience. So the peer review process, it becomes really entirely meaningless when the claims being reviewed can't be independently verified or interrogated at all. So when academic journals, when they're publishing papers like this, again, it destroys not only just the credibility of that journal in question, but erodes the broader public trust in academic research completely.
That it most certainly
Yep,
does.
true.
All right, guys, we're going to leave it here for the first pilot episode of the Citation Needed podcast. Please let us know what you think of the show. If you're excited about it and you want to tune in for more, do take the time to rate and review us on whatever podcast platform you're on, or leave a comment if you're on.
What do the comments say? What do the comments say? None of these people understand that Colin Wright has no idea what he's talking about. None of them get it. Yeah. This was about owning the libs. It's always about owning the libs. I don't know how to get in front of people to get them to move from shitty, just completely unhinged from reality analysis like this to the more accurate analysis. I wish I understood how to do that. I wish I did. Maybe most people aren't capable of doing that. I don't know. They're so programmed into this mindset of like owning the libs, 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 owning the libs. It is, Suzanne, isn't it soul crushing when we see stuff like this? Isn't it soul crushing? 40,000 views that has. 40,000 views. And I'm just like, you know what? If this is what people want, then they will experience the results that are commiserate with their own actions. There's so many other things I would like to do though. I feel like I just did the whole video with real talking points. And it's like I already did it. And it's just like, you know, ultimately speaking, people who want to know the truth will find out the truth. People who don't want to know the truth will not find out the truth. And so, guys, if you want to know what the truth is and you want accurate analysis about what is going on, then the very best place to go, I think, is my Substack. That's going to be Karlyn, KARLYN.substack.com. And I will break all this stuff down for you in plain English. I will show you where these ideas come from. You can join the Counter-Revolutionary Book Club by following the book club link at the very top. This is where we actually read some of the documents that Colin Wright really should have been reading. You can catch up with back episodes. I will be posting the episodes, the last two that we've done very soon. I apologize for not posting that yet. It was just a really shitty week. So I apologize for not getting the last episode up yet, but I will be getting that up later today. And also you can find the link to access my campus insurrection report, which is a thorough analysis, the most thorough analysis that exists of the people organizing the campus protests. Some are student groups, some are not student groups. Most of them are revolutionary socialists. I know that we're all shocked about that revelation. Also, as a reminder, next week, this is a perfect time to sign up. If you have not become a member of my Substack yet, you need to become a member of my Substack. Because next week we're not only starting a membership drive next week, because I have to scale up the amount of members I have to be able to do some of the things I want to do. So this is a perfect time. If you've been waiting to support the work I'm doing, we have a massive, massive spy stream that's going to be happening next week. Spy stream is where we infiltrate leftist events live and we watch them live. So you very literally could watch the news unfold right in front of you, which is always a really cool thing. This is available to members on my Substack. That is Karlyn, KARLYN.substack.com. This will be a multi-day infiltration next week. And so I will let you know more about it next week. I always have to keep this stuff pretty close to my chest because we can't give away what we're doing because then I might get caught and I don't want to get caught and you don't want me to get caught. But this is going to be a really good infiltration. This is going to be one of those ones where there's absolutely going to be crazy things said and you're going to want to be there for it. So make sure you become a member on the Substack for that. And if you feel like buying some of my books, you can head over to Red Menace Press. That is redmenacepress.com. That will link you to all of my books. You can find all my books on Amazon. We've got A Brief History of Racism out. We've got Debunking the Communist Manifesto. And we've got my personal favorite at the moment. And I really want people to read this book because I'm so proud of this book. I wrote a novel. I wrote a dystopian fiction. It is called The Communist Manifesto, a Revolutionary Fairy Tale. It is literally a dystopian fairy tale based on the Communist Manifesto and the inevitable downfall after the Communist Manifesto. And I'm really proud of this. It's not an audiobook yet because I haven't made the audiobook yet, but I will someday. But for right now, it is on Kindle and paperback. It is available on Amazon. If you like things like 1984 or The Hunger Games, you will love this book. I promise you. I promise you. I mean, maybe I'm just like, I'm just into my own work, but like, I loved creating this book. This was a story I've had in my head for a while, and I love the way it turned out, and I'm very proud of it. And it looks really cool. It looks really cool. The cover just looks badass. It's got a murder child. See, the murder child on the cover is your sign of what is probably in the book. I'm just saying. And if you understand queer Marxism a lot better than Colin Wright understands queer Marxism, you probably already understand the argument that this book is going to make about what happens after the communist revolution. So pick it up. It's a quick read. You can read it in, a sitting or two. And if you leave a review on Amazon, if you like it, only if you like it, only if you have a 5-star review. Leave the 5-star review on Amazon. Tell people what you think. I am independently publishing all my own books now, so I can publish whenever I want and whatever I want. And this has freed up a world of creative possibility for me. And I've got a lot of books in the hopper that I'm going to be publishing this year. And I think I'm creating the best anti-communist content on the internet. And if you think someone is creating better anti-communist content than me, then tell me who they are. Honestly, I would love to talk to them. But I think right now I'm creating some of the best anti-communist content on the internet. So if this is the stuff you like, then stick around a while because I will show you things that no one else is showing you. I'll do analysis no one else is doing. And we'll have a lot more fun than people who are just miserable talking about this stuff. Because if we're going to do something, we might as well, not be miserable. All right, guys, that's all I have for right now. I'm going to go take my leave and cry into my pillow. I'll be back tomorrow for Socialism Saturday, guys. Take care. Have a good one. We'll see you soon. Bye.
How are you feeling? How long have you been here?
3 months, May 17th.
And what brought you?
That's difficult to answer.
has eventually resulted in your being here in the hospital.
That's difficult to answer.